Welcome, everyone, to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. To my right here is Shadow the Night Owl. He's my mascot of the channel and my buddy. He gives me some good suggestions sometimes. Lisa, congratulations on surpassing 40,000 subs. You'll be at 50,000 soon. I hope so, Lisa. Well, I know so, I should say. It's just a matter of time. Ramajama, what's shaking? Miss Kim, the mod, welcome. Thank you for smashing the like, Tennis Girl. Glad, and Lisa Mitchell and Tennis Girl, glad you're here. D, how are you? Tonight we got at least a couple of videos to go over. CeeCee Moore, the DNA expert, joined Brian Entin. We're going to go over that first. And then I think one of my favorite people that covers this case from a law side is Matt Murphy. And we're going to watch him on the Missing YouTube channel. Laura actually brought that video to my attention, and I'm glad she did, because that guy's pretty good. He's on the ball. I think him and Maureen O'Connell, they are the two people on the ball, in my opinion. So we're going to go over that. Hello there, Rooster. Maureen, how are you? Hey, everyone, I'm still awake due to a brother who called me at midnight my time. Just got off the phone. Boy, holy mackerel, 3 hours. Keeping you up all night there, Maureen. Shorty, Shoddy, what's shaking? Yes, thank you to Miss Kim and to Song Bits for modding. Reagan, how are you? KC, what's shaking? Like I said, I'm about to fire my buddy Livin from modding. Hopefully your brother's okay there, Maureen. Hello there, Julie. Welcome. As you float on in here, Shadow reminded me to remind you all to like the video and to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Spank that like button if you feel so inclined. And as always, Super Chat's a great way to support the channel and get questions answered. Super Stickers, great way to support the channel. And becoming a channel member or gifting memberships gives you access to the members-only live streams. I don't know about that, Rama. Maybe. Linda, how are you? All right, so let's play this here as people float on in. Tomorrow, I'll be uploading part 1 of my interview with LCSW Jess. And LCSW is licensed clinical social worker. She also does couples counseling. She's a couple therapist. And she has personal experience with narcissistic abuse. She's the woman that you saw in a short video the other day. So I'm going to upload about an hour of my interview with her. And then there's another 45 minutes to go after that. Tim, how are you? That's right, Rammer Jammer. He's auditioning. He's auditioning to be a mod. It's good. Yeah, Lisa, also my interview with Christian John. He is Hypervigilance on Instagram and Facebook. Tech, what's shaking? Glad everyone's rolling on in here. Rolling on a river. Knackered. What an English thing to say. It was intense. Love, love. It was not love, love. It was heavy but close. It's like a poem. Well, I bet Maureen's a good ear to listen, if I had to guess. So that's probably why your brother feels comfortable reaching out to you in those times, if I had to guess. But let's see what Brian Entin and CeeCee Moore have to say about things.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. Really, really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I really appreciate all the support. Today is Thursday. It is now day 68 since Nancy Guthrie literally just vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. So many of you have asked me more about the DNA, what could be happening behind the scenes with the DNA testing. Remember, there was DNA found inside Nancy's home that investigators said did not belong to Nancy or anyone in her family or her inner circle, which was a good thing. I mean, it could belong to the suspect. The problem is, as you know, if you've been following the case, the DNA is mixed, and it seems they're having problems sorting that out behind the scenes. In this episode, you're going to hear from a renowned DNA expert and genealogist, CeeCee Moore, and she has some really interesting things to say about what could be happening to try to sort out this DNA issue. First of all, why she believes they should be going back to the crime scene, even now, even after.
And that surprises me from CeeCee Moore, because I would have thought that crime scene would be long gone contaminated by now. But the DNA expert says no, go back. There can still be DNA from the perpetrators there. There could also be DNA from people from years ago too. And she goes on to say that as well. But it surprised me. I thought it would have been a lost cause. But shows what I know about DNA. Whereas our forensic expert, some days, also known as Reagan, she's the woman that wrote that poem that I posted. She probably would have told me that too.
The crime scene has been cleared and what they should be doing there. She explains that. She also talks about this new machine that is coming out next year. And I know next year seems like a long way away, but these DNA technologies advance so quickly. She explains how this new machine could really help with this DNA issue that she suspects is happening behind this.
And Tim said to me that Brian Entin's trying to get an interview with Savannah. And if I had to guess, if Savannah chooses to be interviewed by anyone in the YouTube world, it would probably be Brian Entin, if I had to guess. Maybe Ashley Banfield. No, not, absolutely not, actually, considering that she was the one that said Tommaso may be prime suspect. So definitely not Ashley Banfield. What am I talking about? So it would be Brian Entin, right? If she chooses anyone, that's probably who it would be. And I think that would be a good choice. I hope Brian gets it.
Scenes with the Nancy Guthrie case. She also talks about why she would urge Savannah Guthrie to plead with some of these DNA companies like Ancestry.com, why she thinks someone like Savannah should be going to them because they don't open up their databases to law enforcement, which a lot of people don't realize, which she's going to explain in this episode. But it's a fascinating conversation because, again, it's such a complicated world when it comes to DNA, and it's emerging so quickly. And there are all these private companies now getting involved. And there's a lot happening behind the scenes that could really help advance the Nancy Guthrie case. And CeCe's going to explain that. I'm joined now by genetic genealogist CeeCee Moore. CeCe, it's always nice to see you. It's been a while since I talked to you. I had you on my show kind of towards the beginning of the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and things just got so crazy. I really wanted to check back in with you because I was curious what you think is happening behind the scenes now with the DNA. The latest I've heard is the sheriff said, that there was still stuff happening behind the scenes with the DNA. He hasn't given a lot of specifics. What do you think? What do you think is going on?
I think that companies or a company that was planning to release a new mixture deconvolution software package has probably rushed that. You know how companies, especially tech companies, have a plan for the next year or so. They say, oh, we're going to do that third quarter next year. I suspect that has been moved up to right now. And it's very possible that they are testing out different algorithms at the moment to see if they can deconvolute that complex mixture. I fear that it's the only thing they may have to work with right now. I'm hoping that they are testing additional items from Nancy's home. That can take quite a while if you've collected dozens or hundreds of swabs or other materials, because as I've said, I can't believe there wouldn't be his DNA or their DNA at that crime scene.
So she's saying that the deconvolution process, that's going to be the big thing right now because they have a complex sample. Complex DNA sample is when there's more than one person in the sample. A simple sample is when there's one person's DNA in the sample. But of course, this case will be anything other than simple, literally and figuratively. So they have a complex sample of DNA, and you have to hope it's a higher percentage of each person because then they can deconvolute it to figure out who it is, do genetic genealogy. But let's see what else she has to say about it.
Explain to me what you mean by that. So you think there's a company that had some kind, this is the way I'm trying, some kind of new technology that was going to come out that because the Nancy Guthrie case is so high visibility, they would be moving that up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's my educated guess based on what the sheriff has said. He said something about how, they were rushing this. He didn't say what it was, but that is my guess, because deconvolution is a huge part of forensic DNA analysis. And there have been, efforts to deconvolute on the STR side for decades. And they have a lot of software packages that they can work with. But we've only been using SNP testing for forensic samples since around 2018. And that means that it is lagging behind. It wouldn't be able to use the same types of software packages. At Parabon, our bioinformatics scientists are really amazing with deconvolution, but they are sort of leading the pack there. And I think there are a lot of efforts to be able to improve our ability, because we run into that so often with sexual assaults, or as the technology becomes more sensitive with transfer DNA, the ability to detect the tiniest amount of DNA that someone leaves behind really increases the likelihood you're going to get a mixture, right? Like
Shadow says hello to everyone coming in as well. Shadow's the night owl here.
On a doorknob, for instance. So to me, that makes the most sense. I don't have any insider information that that's what's going on, but I know that Straya Forensics, for example, in UC Santa Cruz is really groundbreaking, and they have certain packages like that they sell to the other labs that are doing forensic genetic genealogy work and creating those SNP profiles. Now, at Parabon, our expertise with mixture is on microarray. So microarray is this SNP chip where they put the DNA on there and it reads about 700,000 genetic markers across the genome, those SNPs, those single nucleotide polymorphisms. But many of the companies that are working with law enforcement to create these SNP profiles are using sequencing, whole genome sequencing. And right now there's really no good techniques to deconvolute on those. And so we run all of our mixtures through microarray, and they do very well there. But if you are exclusively using that whole genome sequencing, you're going to really, really struggle with mixtures. And so I know there's been a lot of work to try to deconvolute using that platform versus microarray. So I suspect there are a number of people that are working as fast as they can, trying to figure out a way to work with these more complex mixtures. Nancy's case is certainly the one that is making this a top priority, but it's something that we really need in the field anyway.
So do you think, I know there's more and more of these companies out there now as this technology emerges, would they be sort of fighting to get involved with this case because it's so high profile, because they could be the ones that end up in the headlines if they're able to, and you said, is it deconvolute? Is that the word you use?
Right. So when you're
that essentially, is that breaking it apart, since we know it's mixed? The sheriff has said the DNA was mixed.
Yeah, the term for extracting out one person's DNA from that is deconvolution. So if you're trying to deconvolute that mixture and find that unknown perpetrator's DNA, that is the term that is used, and that's the technique that's used as well. And so, yes, I think there's a good chance that people would like to make their name on, being a deconvolution expert on this case, because it is so high profile and it does provide a platform for somebody to help solve it and, again, make a name for themselves or their company. So I think that's possible. But there's also companies behind the scenes that really aren't looking for that type of recognition that could be working with DNA Labs International and trying to help them push that forward. So it's not necessarily a competing company. It could be a company like Estrella that partners with a lot of the labs that do this work.
I heard you say somewhere that you think there needs to be a second crime scene. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's not that I think there needs to be, but
What an interesting question by Brian Entin there. What do you think she means when she says a second crime scene? We'll hear her thoughts in a second here, but what do you think she means? Second crime scene.
I think that if they have collected all of the potential DNA at the residence and all they've ended up with is this complex DNA mixture, then my hope is that they will discover a second crime scene somewhere where Nancy was held, or perhaps the car that she was transported in, because that gives a whole nother opportunity for finding the DNA of the perpetrator. And so if they've not been successful in finding a good source of his DNA at Nancy's home, my hope is they'll get another chance. Now, the really sad part of that is, if they find her body, if she's deceased, that gives them another opportunity. And so I don't think it's the end. I'm really hoping that this, just doesn't go quiet and we never hear anything again. And so that there was a grandfather kidnapped in Australia, and it was apparently mistaken identity. It happened right around the same time as Nancy's case, and I was surprised more people didn't talk about it. But they found a second crime scene. They found a location where he had been held, and that gave them a lot of additional evidence. And so that's what really kind of got me thinking in that way.
So the definition of a second crime scene is another place that they know the victim was. So there was times when they thought, oh, maybe Annie and Tommaso's house is a second crime scene, right? And I'm not saying it is, but that is what a second crime scene is. Is it a car? Is it Annie or Tommaso's car? Is it their house? Is it the Uber car? What is it? But right now they don't know, I guess.
That makes sense. If they don't, though, and all they have is this DNA sample from the house, which we know is mixed, and they're having maybe trouble with it, eventually, and you mentioned the emerging technology and these different companies, eventually, will they definitely be able to crack it, or is there a chance that they couldn't?
I don't know the proportions in that mixture. It depends how many people are in it and what the percentages of those profiles are, and which one is the perpetrator, or which ones, right? There could be 5 people in that. And the person they're trying to identify, if they're even in that mixture, might only be 10%. And the chances of identifying somebody with, that small of a contribution, I think, is unlikely, even with advancements. I'm not saying.
So she said 10%. If it's only 10% of one person, it's going to be very difficult. Remember, our forensic expert in the chat, who I've not seen recently, but it's Reagan, username Sundays, she said 28% is the magical number. Maybe Bella can confirm that, although that's not her area of expertise. Bella's the surgical nurse, but Reagan said 28% is the magical number. Let's see if CeCe agrees.
It would never happen, but I think it is extremely challenging. But without knowing specifically what this mixture is that they're working with, it's hard for me to predict. I still believe that there has to be the perpetrator or perpetrators' DNA at that crime scene. And I've done some interviews and talked about this, and I see headlines say that I'm giving the FBI advice. I'm not giving the FBI advice. I've been asked, what would I do if it was my case? I would have crime scene investigators return to that home and continue trying to find sources of the DNA, because DNA is quite hardy. It lasts. I've worked cases where they've detected DNA decades later. And some of my cases where we think we're dealing with the perpetrator's DNA, it's actually DNA from someone who lived in that home many, many years earlier. So I believe that it's possible that that person that needs to be identified, or persons, do have DNA at that crime scene, even if it hasn't been collected yet. The other possibility is a hair, a rootless hair. That's where Estrella comes in again. Estrella Forensics they are that groundbreaking company out there in UC Santa Cruz that is helping us solve cases with rootless hair, which scientists said would never be possible. But Dr. Ed Green there has made it possible. And I personally have helped solve a handful of cases that only had rootless hair and no other evidence, no other physical evidence. And so it's really hard to go somewhere and not leave something behind. some kind of DNA or even just a hair. Even with how that person was dressed, it's still very, very possible, and I think probable, that something was left behind.
Yeah, two follow-up questions on that. Rootless hair, so is typically the DNA found in the root part of the hair that's like sticking out of that's in your head? Is that right?
Yeah, so traditionally that's when hair has been useful, is when it has a root. A
Okay.
root is a great source of DNA, but there are thousands of cases that have rootless hair, just the hair shaft, broken off hair. And
Okay.
they've always been told that that's not helpful. You're not going to be able to get useful DNA or a profile from that. But thanks to the brilliant Dr. Ed Green, we are able to use that to identify someone through investigative genetic genealogy. So he found a way to extract a SNP profile from that rootless hair, which allows us to make that preliminary identification. And then, of course, law enforcement has to follow that lead, look for other evidence, etc. But it has been very, very successful, and it will continue to be so. It's really the most recent advancement. You know, there was investigative genetic genealogy, which was a huge jump forward, but then there was the rootless hair technique that was another big jump forward.
It's so interesting that it's people in private industry and at different universities that are making these advancements, because I think like outsiders like me just assume like, oh, the FBI, they would be the ones to have the best of the best and everything would just go to Quantico. But it sounds like there's different companies and different professors at different places throughout the country that specialize in different things that could be helpful.
Yeah, I think there are people who won't take no for an answer, whether they're in government or private industry. And those are the people that are really pushing this forward. You know, we were told we would never be able to use autosomal SNP DNA for genealogical purposes, and we proved that wrong. And then we were told you'd never be able to get usable DNA from a hair shaft, and now, you know, they've proven that wrong. Dr. Ed Green and his team has proven that wrong. And so I don't think it's necessarily government versus private. It's just that type of person who doesn't take no for an answer, doesn't believe that, and even takes it as a challenge. Oh, you say I can't do this? I'm going to find a way to do it.
Right. And you mentioned going back to the scene. Do you think that they should do that even now? I mean, because we know that, you know, I've been out there when family members have gone in and people have gone in and, you know, the prosecutors were there one day, there was moving people there. Would it still be beneficial despite all these people going in and out since they cleared the scene?
Well, I wish that hadn't happened, but yes, because they know who's been in and out.
So that's her explanation for why she still thinks people should go back and look for more DNA, because they know who has been in and out. I don't know, though. I don't trust the local law enforcement there to know and to have kept records correctly of who was in and out of that house. Maybe I'm just cynical, but CeCe seems to think that, well, they know who it was in, so they can rule out any of those like, okay, this person was this sample. Maybe, but I guess at this point, right, what do you have to lose by going back? What do you have to lose? But also, here's the other problem. Like, aren't people living in it again? Or isn't the family or the house was returned back, right? Have people been doing things in there? I don't think we know the answer to that question either. But Shadow reminded me to tell you all to like the video. Likes are free. Leave your DNA in that like button. Maybe spank the like button if you feel so inclined. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And say hello to the flock of black sheep here in the live chat. Awesome group of people here.
So their DNA can still be eliminated. It's still been a relatively small number of people inside the house. Now, outside the house might be a different story. And so I don't know what they're working with. I mean, it's possible they do have a viable DNA profile right now, and we just don't know it, and they're working behind the scenes. But if they don't, I don't want, you know, this to be the end of it. And so to me, if a second crime scene isn't found soon, or Nancy is not found soon, then the next best thing would be to return to that known crime scene and see if they can find DNA. Because if he was there for 40 minutes or 42 minutes, which I have heard is a theory, then...
And again, that time frame between the Nest Cam being removed and the pacemaker being disconnected it does not necessarily represent the time that the perpetrator was in the house. So might not have been 41 minutes or whatever it is, might have been 20 minutes. But even if it was 20 minutes, they still probably left something. So CeCe saying they must have left something, and considering the sample that they have doesn't seem to be the best, she thinks you can go back and do better. And to which I would say, considering there's nothing else going on, why not? At this point, why not? But what do you think, chat? Do you think it's going to be fruitful for them to go back into the house and look for more DNA samples? Or has just too much time passed and too many other people have been there and it's going to be ridiculous and a waste of time? What do you think? 1, go back to the house, look for more samples. 2, no, it's pretty much too late.
It's almost impossible not to leave your DNA behind. And I've talked about this a lot, about that bite flashlight that he appears to have in his mouth. You know, you would be leaving saliva. I just don't see how you wouldn't. When he leaned over to try to disable the camera, I think it would have been very hard not to slobber onto the ground below that. But also in the home, if he was giving any sort of oral commands, he would have had to take that out of his mouth, and he would have immediately had plentiful DNA on the outside of those gloves. And so unless he changed his gloves, he very well would have left something. But somebody wrote to me yesterday talking about this, because I've been talking about it a lot. And they said they have used those bite lights and that a lot of saliva is produced and a lot of slobber ends up happening. And that was exactly my theory. I've never used one, but it only makes sense. And so I think that there is likely saliva at that scene, but it's really hard to know where, right? And to collect that, even if you're a very expert crime scene investigator, it's a hard thing to predict. But, you know, there's that whole house there. If the person was in the bedroom, they were clearly in the living room, the back door, in front, I still think it's worth trying if they don't have a viable DNA sample. I just don't want, you know, them to give up. I don't want any of us to have to give up. And so, no, it's not the best option, but I think it's still a possibility.
If they do have a viable DNA sample by now, do you think that there would have already been more progress? Do you think that the fact that there hasn't been progress is a sign that they don't?
I do, because we can look at the glove that was found about 2 miles away. They pretty quickly identified that person and ruled them out.
And so I think that was through genetic, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that was through genetic genealogy.
I believe
it was on process of elimination of how they must have done that.
Yeah, I haven't heard it confirmed, but I have a very strong belief that they did use genetic genealogy to identify that person. It makes sense. So you can see how quickly that happened. So I think if they had a viable profile, and a SNP profile is what it's called when they create that file that they can upload to the genetic genealogy databases, I think they would have put a lot of resources on it, and that person would have been identified by now, unless they just found that DNA, you know, very, very recently. But if it was among the first things tested, I believe this case would already be solved.
So you suspect they don't have a viable sample at this point?
I would suspect that that is correct, that the samples they have are not the best. And considering how much, what's the word I'm looking for here? How much she would rely on genetic genealogy and DNA, I bet you CeCe thinks, well, if they really had a good sample, they probably would have figured out more things by now. I think that's what she thinks.
I suspect that, but I don't know, because they may be continuing to test swabs and items from the home that may turn up something. You know, it's like I said, it's really hard to predict where you're going to find that DNA. And so if they collected a lot of swabs and physical evidence, it's certainly possible they might come across that one DNA profile that is needed to break this case wide open.
You said something else that really interested me, something else I read, that Savannah should be begging some of these databases like Ancestry to open up. That's
only if they have that SNP profile though, right? It's not.
There's no point, right, if they don't have anything to enter into the database.
Yeah, and when I said that is when we didn't really know what they had.
Yeah.
But I think with the glove, they were able to just use GEDmatch and or family tree DNA, the two that we always use, to identify that person. And I think that kept the commercial companies from getting that subpoena or warrant to open up their databases. I think it would have happened if they had not been able to quickly make that identification. And so if they are able to create that SNP profile of the presumed perpetrator, I do believe that the big commercial companies that have barred law enforcement will be served with a warrant to make those comparisons.
Yeah, and I never really understood that, CeCe, until you explained it to me. And I think people just gloss this over when they're doing the stories about these cases, is that the big databases like Ancestry.com do not share their information with law enforcement, right? So it's just these smaller specialized ones. So when they try to do the genetic genealogy, they don't have access to everything.
Right. So there are over 54 million people who have taken direct consumer DNA tests now. If we could compare against those large databases, then we would be solving cases every few hours, multiple a day. Instead, we're using less than 2 million profiles to compare against because of the restrictions that have been placed on those databases. And so it really is a question of genetic privacy.
I mean, what do you think about that, chat? What side are you on? Do you think the top 3 should be forced to open up their database? Because there's going to be pros and cons to everything, of course. If they're forced, there would probably be less people using it. Now, because again, how many people do you think are going to even be at risk, right? How many people are committing these kinds of crimes where they would even be worried about it? Probably more than we would like to think. But what do you think? Is it okay the way they do it right now, that they don't have to share? Or would you like them see them forced to share? So press 1 if you want to see these top 3 companies forced to share. Press 2, no, genetic privacy is actually very important, and it's a slippery slope to do otherwise.
Versus public safety, right? Because we could be getting violent criminals off the streets, very, very quickly if we could compare against even a fraction of that 50 million people. But instead, we're limited to the 3 smallest databases, GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA, and the new DNA Justice database that I helped create.
Have they ever made an exception? Have any of those bigger databases ever let law enforcement work with them?
No, they haven't, because they release transparency reports, I think annually, maybe more often, and they let their customers know what they have had to provide to law enforcement. And so far, it's just been like credit card information, that type of thing, nothing as far as their genetic databases. But I think that's coming. I think it'll be a knockdown, drag out fight. This would have been an interesting case if it had come up, because the public is so behind the Guthries and wants Nancy found so much that I think it would have been a really bad PR move for those companies to fight against the use of their databases. But they would, because they feel they need to protect their customers from, law enforcement's prying eyes, right? And so what people need to understand, though, is even if they did serve a successful warrant, they're not getting your DNA or your DNA profile. They're just forcing that company to compare that unknown perpetrator's DNA against the database to see who they're relatives with. So they're not seeing anybody's actual DNA profile. They're just getting a list back that would say, this person shares 1% of their DNA, or this person shares 3%. This is most likely a second cousin, for instance. And so most of the time, it's going to be people who share very, very small amounts of their DNA. But there are exceptions where we get a very close relative, even in the small databases. I've had parent-child matches and full siblings. So you would see that some. So it would impact some people much more significantly. But for the vast majority of people, it might turn out their third cousin is a serial killer.
Do you, and I remember with Brian Koberger, they were really careful to keep the names confidential. Like, we never saw the names of who the distant relatives were. That was all redacted.
Yeah, that's been best practices. We've tried to do that from the very beginning. Because I came from the adoption search world, and most of my colleagues that do this work did as well, we were already very well educated on the concerns of, matches and people in those databases. So we've bent over backwards to fight for those names to be privatized. Now, some people have come forward and outed themselves and said, they were the closest match on a case. But as far as the reports that we're providing that then go to the courts, we leave out the names because that's not what's important. What's important is the common ancestors, right? So if you've got 5 matches who all share their great-great-grandparents, that's really...
And again, most of the people in the chat here seem to think, no, they shouldn't be forced. But there was a couple people that said they should. But this is kind of like the Apple versus the FBI case. The FBI, they wanted Apple to give them a key to break into people's phones in order to find terrorists. But Apple was not for it. And I don't know how that case turned out. I think they won, though. I don't think the government was able to break into the phones. But if someone can remind me how that turned out, let me know.
All that matters. We don't need to know anything more about those people.
Do you think the Nancy Guthrie case, if they end up getting a good profile, could be the case where, for the first time, these companies are forced to let law enforcement in?
I do. And if it's not this case, it'll be another one. It'll be the next big case where they've got a profile, they've got a DNA sample, it's not hitting in CODIS, and they need to stop that person, before they hurt anyone else. Like in Brian Kohberger's case, I believe he would have hurt more people had he not been identified through investigative genetic genealogy very quickly. So I think it's going to happen. It's really just a matter of time and what cases happen. I think it would have happened on the Charlie Kirk assassination, for instance, if they hadn't identified him quickly, or the attempted assassination of Trump. Those types of cases, they're not going to hesitate to try to get into those databases if they are stuck. Because
that is interesting, Butterfly Girl. I don't know what I think about this, but I'll put it up here. Blood droplets came first if foliage was on top of the blood. I guess it depends, right? Because as you're walking out the door, some foliage can be rustled up and then can settle back down on the blood. I think that's a possibility too, right? So like there's blood dripping, and then like as you're walking by, the gusts come up again. But I could see either way. And X tells me that the FBI lost the case versus Apple, so they hired an Israeli tech company to hack the phones. Oh my God. So did that work for them? It's attached to my email, Montana. There we go. But that is some interesting thoughts there, Butterfly Girl. That's interesting.
They're, really important cases, really high profile cases where they feel that they can make an exception in those cases because law enforcement is trying to follow the rules. They are trying to use genetic genealogy in a responsible way. They don't want to turn the public against this tool. And that was what I really fought for the first several years I was doing this work, was we've got to stick to the rules. We've got to follow these because we don't want to turn the public against the use of genetic genealogy for law enforcement. But I've realized over the years that most of the public thinks we are using those big databases. They don't even know that there are rules.
I honestly did. And I even covered Kohberger and everything until you explained it.
I didn't know that either until this case, but now I know. I know the top 3 don't. I would be curious, like Laura asked, though, can you use a warrant? If you got a warrant, would they be forced to? Or would that just come to the same problem where there would be a conflict of interest? I don't know.
To me, I didn't fully understand it.
Yeah, so I've softened a little bit on it, especially after working so many cases of these terrible violent criminals where you see real harm done to people and to families and to society. I'm a little bit more in the gray area now, where I think that in some cases, an exception may be, arguable, right? And especially because people think we're doing it already. And also, I was involved in a long-term study with Baylor University, and we found across the board that 91% of people were supportive of the idea of using investigative genetic genealogy to stop violent criminals. That was eye-opening to me because I'm kind of a target. I get a lot of the negativity. There's a lot of very loud.
And that's a good question, Brenda. Why wouldn't you want the criminals to be caught? The issue becomes on what turns someone into a criminal, right? So people might think right now, oh, I'm fine. But look at history. Sometimes trivial things could make you a criminal, right? Look at during World War II. Being a Jewish person could be a criminal offense back then. So again, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So maybe there could be other things that they could find you that you don't think it's a problem right now, but down the line, it turns into a problem. And then maybe that genetic stuff helps you to get caught. That's the thing to think about. Jokin, welcome. Also, Shadow says to please remember to like the video. Likes are free and help contribute to pay for his hoodie snacks. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And say hello to the flock of black sheep here in the live chat. Great group of folks.
Minority voices. And so to see that we had such broad support, and then on the other hand, that so many people think we're already using Ancestry, 23andMe, that, and then also what I said as far as seeing how much damage is done on the other side of things, I've definitely changed my viewpoint a little bit, because what's the worst thing that can happen if they compare against your DNA? A close family member of yours is outed as a violent criminal. But do we really want those people having access to our loved ones, our children, our grandma? Do we want them sitting around our Thanksgiving table? As difficult as it would be to make that sort of discovery, I think it's important to weed those people out, not just from society, but from among our own families.
And again, you would think it's only for criminals, but things can change. Think also vaccine versus no vaccine. Maybe people want to know, oh, did you take your vaccine? And maybe there's a way to find out via stuff if you did or didn't. Again, so it might seem cut and dry right now, but there's other variables that can pop up. So that's when wisdom comes into play, right?
When if you're also that creeped out by being in a database, you could just not do the DNA testing to find out you could say, I'm not doing the ancestry testing, right? It's not like,
and many people have made that decision, but the problem is their relatives have decided for them, because if your second cousin has tested, we can find you, right? Okay. And so a lot of people have decided, I'm not going to do it, but especially if a close family member makes a different decision, then your DNA or part of your DNA is already exposed.
Interesting.
So with your second cousin, it's only 3%, right? But if multiple second cousins from different branches have tested, or your first cousin, there is a lot of overlap that you're seeing. And so if one sibling, for instance, says, I'm not going to test, and the other full sibling tests, well, it's exactly the same family tree.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Interesting. Yeah. See, something
so
basic to you, to me, is like, I hadn't thought about it that way. Even if you chose not to do the test, family members did, it's kind of like the same as you doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Pandora is really out of the box as far as those big databases. We built this incredibly powerful tool for human identification when people were laughing at us and rolling their eyes at us in the early days. They thought, oh, these genealogists, right? Nobody took us seriously. But by the time people realized what we had built, it was already too late, because there were tens of millions of people who had made the choice to put their DNA in these databases. So I don't think there's any putting it back in the box. It's done. And the vast majority of people in the United States are identifiable as a result.
Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, they say. But that's the other thing, right? There's going to be unforeseen risks down the line. And by definition, unforeseen, you don't know what they could be, but they could be something where right now you think it's all good, but down the line, it could be a completely different story, because you don't know, right? These kinds of things all presume we're always going to be under a good government. Well, not always the case. Not always the case. So what can turn into being illegal can be quite troubling.
It's a different subject, but it's interesting with the Guthrie case, you know, them being able to pull the video off of the Google camera on the front of the house, even though Nancy didn't have a subscription. It was just an inactive, no subscription camera. She wasn't paying for the subscription. Google still had those images somewhere on a cloud, which got a lot of people kind of a little bit creeped out. Like, I guess they have your images, even if you're not paying them to store them. You also think about like Alexa. Is Alexa always listening? Your Alexa. I mean, I think people are just kind of creeped out by this, you know, big brother, big government. I mean, do you sort of understand that with the genealogy too? I mean, it's kind of like you feel like they know everything about you.
Oh, I totally get it. But I think that people need to worry about a lot of other things, like you point out. Also, you know, your DNA means nothing to me if I can't build your biological family tree. And to do that, I'm using public records. So in this country, we've made certain choices that make us really vulnerable to identification. And that includes allowing companies to compile all this information about us and our families and sell it. These people search type databases. That's how I will identify who someone's parents are most of the time, and sometimes grandparents, because with living people, it's much harder to identify who their families are. If it weren't for what people put out there about themselves on social media, which we use a lot to build these trees, and then those people search type databases, we don't have access to credit bureaus, but it's a similar idea. We've allowed that. Whereas a country like Canada protects their citizens' privacy much, much more strictly. And so it's very difficult to identify.
I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought Canada would be the opposite and had less privacy than America. But instead, they have more. Wow. Interesting.
Identify living people there. So when we're working on cases up in Canada, we can often get it to grandparents and we say, you know, to law enforcement, you've got to identify who the grandkids are, because we can't do it because Canada is so strict about their privacy laws. So you can really see the difference when you're working a case in the US versus somewhere like Canada. I mean, we just have, as a society, chosen to put a lot of information out there about ourselves, and even more so now with social media. And so people, I think, should think more about those types of things. There's a lot of emphasis put on genetic privacy, but it's not nearly as big of a threat as some of these other things, in my opinion.
Yeah, really interesting to think about. Is there anything else with Nancy Guthrie's case when it comes to the DNA that we should be considering and thinking about right now? Because it just feels, I mean, it's now been more than 2 months. Things sort of feel like they're at a little bit of a standstill.
I don't think there's a lot more to say, except that there's
Montana. I did get something on PayPal. So thank you very much for your support. I'll give you the shout out, even though it's through PayPal. But Shadow likes that. Shadow said, yes, some good hootie snacks coming my way. So thank you very much for that. And please remember, everyone else, likes are free. So spank that like button or leave your DNA of choice on the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. We're coming up on 50,000. Then the next big milestone is 100,000. You need a plaque for that.
undoubtedly a lot of work going on behind the scenes. There's no doubt in my mind they are continuing to work with whatever evidence or potential evidence they have, including that complex mixture, to try to help find Nancy and who's responsible for this. And so we might not hear about it because sometimes things move really slowly. You know, science can move slowly and genetic genealogy can move slowly depending on certain factors. But I don't think people should doubt that there is still concerted efforts behind the scenes.
And just one last
Autumn, I should get Shadow a sign. I'll hold it up between his wings that says "Feed me," sort of like Wile E. Coyote when he holds up the sign when he's over the cliff and he's about to fall. Help or mommy. Shadow's sign will say "Feed me hootie snacks."
I'm kind of fascinated by that. There's all these different private companies, you know, with new emerging technologies. is this big business? Like if one of them was to be able to crack the case and figure out how to split the DNA and get a good profile, like, is there a lot of money in that? Is that an incentive for some of these companies?
It's a really great question. As I said, no one was that interested in what we were doing when it was just for genealogy and even adoptees. But as soon as we started helping law enforcement solve crimes, it became big business. And there's a lot of competition. There's been venture capital money invested. And so I find it hard to see a huge financial gain because law enforcement is always short of funds. It's so hard to make any money doing genetic genealogy. But I think on the lab side, because none of the crime labs have the capability to create these SNP profiles, there's still a lot of potential for a third-party lab to do a lot of work. There are, so many unsolved cases out there that have DNA available or have rootless hair, for instance, available. It's just a matter of getting funding. And because this is still relatively new, it's not written into the budgets typically. And so, yes, if the federal government decided, hey, we want to really heavily invest in this field, then there could be some real big winners from that, right? Commercial companies. But at the moment, I don't see a lot of potential for that, but it could change. And there are certainly companies that are putting their eggs in that basket, right? Hoping every crime lab in the country is going to adopt this type of technology. But that may end up benefiting the equipment companies the most. So I heard that there is some new equipment that's going to be coming out, a new machine that will help with these deconvolution mixture issues, which is really something because what's been happening now is the DNA comes out of the lab and then bioinformatics scientists work with that data to try to extract out those profiles. But apparently there's some equipment coming that is going to help from the beginning to separate things out. There's a lot of, potential gain there. And so if every crime lab got funding to buy a sequencer.
Danielle, you are very correct. So this is important for me in the channel here. Danielle says, yeah, what's your PayPal, Jared? Because YouTube takes a big fat cut out of your super chats and it's not cool. That is a very true statement. I think it takes like 30 to 40%, which is disappointing. But it is my email, mellowmentoring@gmail.com/ or you can look in Jared Mello. But you can ask Montana what popped up. Let's see here. So ideally, yeah, PayPal or Venmo or Cash App or even Zelle. No, not Zelle. So like PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo, they're the best for me because this is less of a cut. I mean, of course, I like super chats and super stickers too. But YouTube does just take a chunk out of that too. So thanks for bringing that up, Danielle. I appreciate that.
Create SNP profiles and a deconvolution type of machine, then I think there's a lot of money potentially out there.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking if I'm Savannah Guthrie with the resources she has and the platform and, President Trump was calling her to talk about she has that kind of influence. I wonder if there's something she can do or someone she knows to push this along. If you're saying, there's these new technologies, there's new equipment, like maybe there's something out there that could really make a difference that just hasn't been used yet.
Yeah, that equipment I'm told is not ready yet.
Okay.
It probably won't be ready until next year. Now they may be trying to rush it out because this is a great platform, right, to become known. And they may also legitimately really want to help the Guthries. And so, it's hard to predict, but it was interesting to me to hear that was in the offing, that was even being created. And that's why it's so difficult to predict, because we couldn't possibly have predicted where we would be today with genetic genealogy. And so it's hard to predict a couple of years, even a year into the future, of how things might change and what new capabilities we might have.
Yeah, because like the rules are changing, right? Like you said, at one point were they saying rootless hair was just nothing?
Yeah, they said you could only get mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is the least useful for identification. And they just didn't believe you could get autosomal DNA, which is the type of DNA that we use to make these identifications.
As I'm listening to CeCe here, I'm thinking I should invite her on the channel too at a point. And again, to talk about some of the things that Bella and Reagan know about as well. I think that would be interesting. So if you would like to see me invite her, let me know. I have not reached out to her, so I've yet to do that yet. And I do want to reach out to Matt Murphy, the person that we're going to watch next. He's sharp. He's sharp and he's very sure of himself. So I think he's a good guest.
And it was hidden in there, you know, and we've heard about junk DNA, right, for decades. And now they're learning that a lot of that, what was thought to be junk, is not junk at all. And we were told we couldn't use autosomal SNP DNA for genealogy because the recombination rate is so fast, right? You lose 50% every generation. You get 50% from mom, 50% from dad. So the other 50% is lost. And because of that quick recombination, it was believed.
Mike, thank you very much for the super chat, sir. What are any developments today on Nancy's case? Well, the big developments are going to be in the next video here. And because Matt Murphy, I wouldn't call them developments, but he makes a very good point. He asks about, where is the district attorney in this case? Laura Conover, where is she? She's just as missing as Nancy Guthrie at this point. So what's going on with that? And he also believes that the ransom notes are bogus, to which I also agree. So like I said, Matt Murphy gets thumbs up in my book. But we're going to go over it, so I don't want to spoil the whole thing. But thank you again, Mike. And everyone else, please remember to like the video. Shadow keeps on poking me with his freaking wings over here. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And say hello to the flock of black sheep here in the live chat. Great group of folks.
We wouldn't be able to harness that for genealogy. And here we are. Look, you know, that was what really made me jump in with both feet very early on, because I saw the potential for that. And that is what has, you know, made what we do so powerful. We used to use just mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome DNA, and it just didn't have the type of power that we see with this type of DNA.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate your time, CeCe. You always help us understand it in a better way and sort of the bigger picture, because it's complicated. So thank you very much.
You do an amazing job. I've been watching your interviews, and you have some great people on and great information. You keep all of us up to date.
Thank you, CeCe.
So the cool thing about Brian Entin is, here's why Brian Entin's a good interviewer. And this is what I strive to be too. He seems to get the best version of people when he talks to them, right? So people are at ease with him. They're comfortable, but they also take it seriously too. It's not like they're thinking he's a pushover or something. So when he has Maureen on, he has CeCe on, he has former Undersheriff Rick Castiger on, or Union Leader Sergeant Cross on, right? He gets the best out of them because he's a good interviewer and he's not pushy. Now, compare and contrast that with others, maybe you like Megyn Kelly, not quite the same, right? It's a different vibe. So you'll see the same guests on her show that are also on Brian Entin, and she gets a much different version of them. And generally, I would say not as good of a version as Brian Entin gets, right? Just something to watch out for.
As always, I really appreciate CeCe Moore for taking the time to talk with me, especially with something as complicated as DNA and the way that they test it. It's just nice and helpful to have someone be able to explain it to people like you and me who are not scientists, obviously. And we've done the stories. I mean, there are cases that are 30 years old, and there's some new DNA technology that solves an old case. Hopefully, this isn't going to go on for decades with the Nancy Guthrie case. But as you heard CeCe explain, there are emerging technologies right now that could help move this case forward. So again, appreciate her time. Appreciate you guys for following along. Appreciate you for subscribing and supporting my channel. I've got a couple of other things I'm working on, so I'll keep you guys posted. And I hope everybody has a...
Gita, I do interview, and someone was asking if you're okay. I'm trying to see what you said to figure out why they're asking that. But I can't see it right now. But I usually interview people about narcissism and psychology, but I did interview Mike King from Profiling Evil. I'm trying to dip my toes into the criminal justice, crime psychology space in terms of interview. Well, Geet, I hope everything's okay, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Oh, she was joshing. Okay. So now we're going to go to the Missing Persons podcast, or the Missing podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast, Matt Murphy. How are you today?
Good. It's a very, very sunny but very cold day in New York City, the big wicked city.
So, by the way, the name of this YouTube channel is, I want to make sure I get it right. It's called The Missing Podcast on YouTube. And apparently Matt Murphy has been a guest on their show many times. And maybe they have a popular podcast that I just haven't heard of. But they're relatively new to YouTube. Or maybe not that new, but I'm not sure.
They say. So I try to go outside, and in my California brain, I look outside and like everything's blooming. And I step out and it's like this wall. It's like a snow shovel hits me in the face, and the doormen laugh at me almost every day because I can't figure it out. So
no, I was thinking the same thing this morning because it was snowing yesterday. So to wake up and to see like the sun out, it was like deceptive. And then I went out to let the dog out, and it's like, oh no, I still need my winter jacket. I still need that. I'm not.
Have you seen some of those videos on? I think on Instagram. I somehow wound up in my algorithm, and now that we're talking about it, it will definitely show up again.
Absolutely.
Of the dogs that like they open up, the owner opens it up, and they take one step, and they just nope right back inside. There's one with a bunch of ducks that do the same thing. They come out of a barn, like whack whack whack. Nope, and they all just turn right around. So I'm ready for summer. I don't know about you guys, but I'm done with this.
I'm done. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been covering the abduction of Nancy Guthrie over the past few weeks, and we've been trying to get as many people on who have been following it, who comment on it in such a responsible and thoroughly researched manner, and your name was on the list. And you've been on the show a number of times. Everyone knows who you are. We're grateful that you enjoy coming on the show, or at least you pretend to.
I love the show, guys. I love your show. So,
awesome.
Yeah, happy to do it anytime.
Can you just give a quick background on yourself to remind listeners who we're speaking with today?
Sure. I was a DA for 26 years in Orange County, California. Orange County uses a vertical unit system, which is kind of important for today's discussion, I think. And what that means is for certain specialized units, for me, I came through sexual assault and into homicide.
So he was a DA in Orange County, California for 25 years. He hardly seems old enough for that, though, right? But he is.
You get assigned cities. That means that any murder that happened for 17 years when I was in the homicide unit, I'd get the call out. I would go in the middle of the night. I'd deal with all the warrants starting before they moved the body most of the time. I work with the same detectives over and over again. And it's a really interesting thing for a prosecutor because you have a front row seat to the investigation starting inside that yellow tape. And then the idea is the lead detective will then be with you through the judicial process. So I'm there with them, shivering in the cold before we make entry, for the nighttime judge, waiting for the warrant to get signed, all the way up to the sentencing, where that same lead detective will be sitting next to me when the jury comes in. And usually that process takes many years, as your viewers all know. And I would handle everything from deciding when there was enough evidence, who to charge, who to flip, who to make deals with, what charges to file. I would handle the arraignment, the bail hearing, all the way up through the jury trial, opening statements, the whole deal. And Orange County had a philosophy of one lawyer, one case. Even though we doubled up on a few, it was my responsibility to bring it home. So it was a great experience. I loved the job. I might learn slow, but I learned a lot during that time. And then I left the office in 2019. I took a job with ABC News doing legal commentary. I do a lot of stuff with 2020. I'm about to start a podcast of my own with Mark Geragos. under the Megyn Kelly True Crime umbrella, which is
How about that? Starting a true crime podcast with Mark Garagos under the Megyn Kelly True Crime umbrella. How about that?
cool. I wrote a book called The Book of Murder that basically I share what I learned about murders and murder cases and from the legal philosophy all the way to the nitty gritty of some of the more high profile cases that I did, which included I prosecuted the Golden State Killer case. I was the Orange County prosecutor on that. I did the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala. I did Tom and Jackie Hawk's case and a bunch of others. That's who I am. That's my background. And now I still have a legal practice, mostly defending police officers in LA, but I'm doing more and more true crime commentary because everybody's a lot nicer to me when I do this than when I walk into a courtroom.
So if he's defending police officers, holy mackerel, that's probably, you get a lot of hate doing that more than likely. But you notice since he's a former DA, he sees it through that lens. And so that's why he's going to be a little bit critical here of the DA of Pima County, Laura Conover. And those are the people that you get the best criticism from, by the way. The most constructive feedback is the people that have been in that exact position because they know what that position entails. And it's the same thing for current events and politics. If you want to hear the best criticisms of Republicans, you listen to other Republicans. Or if you want to hear the best criticism of other Democrats, listen to Democrats.
So walking to a courtroom, guys, there's at least one person every day, it dawned on me, that there's somebody in that room that hates your guts, whether it's the defendant, if you're the prosecutor, the defendant's mom, somebody, maybe the judge is mad at you, opposing counsel, there's somebody hates you. And I walk into into a shoot for ABC News. Everybody's nice to me. Somebody wants to bring me coffee. Nobody brings you coffee in court. Anyway, I like this stuff. I like this stuff a lot, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So that's who I am. Sorry for the long blathering intro.
No, very good. Very impressive background. And your book is phenomenal. And we got to ask about your next book. You mentioned that, I think the last time that you were on, that you were working on another one. How's that coming?
It's coming along. So it's due, the first manuscript is due to the editors on June 1st. So I'm busy as soon as we get off. I was writing all morning and I'm going to be writing all afternoon. But it's coming along. The idea on this one is last time I did an overview of murders in general. So I had talked about gang murders and murders for money and all that. I prosecuted 14 different serial killers in my 17 years in the homicide unit, and I only wrote about one in the last book. So the editors really like the idea of doing sort of the same thing, walking the reader through what I learned about serial killers in almost 2 decades of doing those cases. And so that's what we're doing, and it's coming together. And I've got I did some really, I think, fascinating cases that nobody's ever heard of before. And some cases garner media, as you guys know, and some don't. A lot of that depends sometimes on what they call elements, if you got a lot of video, maybe that's something that gets picked up, or you've got a particularly sympathetic victim, or there's something really twisted and interesting about it. Truth is, there's a lot of serial killers out there that, nobody ever hears about. And so I'm going to write about some of those. And the behind the scenes, I think, is some of the most fascinating, underreported, undertalked about, how does a homicide prosecutor cross-examine the defense expert who's going to come in and say that he's a victim of abuse as a child, and it mitigates all of his crimes and he should get life instead of the death penalty, for example. So what happens behind the scenes on that? And I think the true crime audience, especially people that really enjoy it and are interested in it, I think everybody's ready for that. As I think it's the next level, like what actually happens, because catching the person is one thing, but the prosecution successfully, it's like, I heard a great analogy not too long ago. It's like climbing Mount Everest. Everybody seems so focused on getting to the top, right? And it's the, waving the flag around on the top and getting their pictures. Some of the most interesting stuff happens on the way down. And of course, if you die on the way down, nobody really cares if you summit it or not. So, and that's what criminal prosecution is. Catching the guy is one thing, but holding him accountable and achieving justice for the victim's family and for the community, that is in many ways even more important in my view, because it's what it's all about. It's achieving public safety and justice, not only for the individual crime, but for the community that you serve as a prosecutor. So that's what the next one's about. And I think people like Lisa. I hope they do.
Yeah, well said. Looking forward to that. I wasn't going to ask this question because I wasn't sure what your answer to the previous question was going to be, but this kind of popped into my mind. And we will talk about Nancy Guthrie right after this, but I couldn't resist asking this question. You said all of the background stuff when going into these investigations, that was going to be super interesting. And I've always wondered, like, how does a series of crime get labeled as connected and part of a serial killing spree or part of a serial killer? Like, is that something that people within law enforcement are hesitant to say? Like, does the word serial killer come up often? Like,
and Matt Murphy's going to get into a good explanation of what the word serial killer even means. And this is interesting because I think a lot of people misuse it when you hear what he's about to say. But also, Shadow just reminded me to like the video. Like the video if you'd like to hear DA Laura Conover say something about the case in Pima County. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And also, super chats, super stickers, and becoming a channel member are great ways to support the channel. Becoming a channel member gives you access to the members-only live streams too. And I'll start including maybe my PayPal, Venmo, / Cash App if people would prefer using those things. It is more helpful for me to use those things, but it's just up to you guys. Any support that I get, I am grateful for. So, and only give what you can afford, right? I don't want people to break the bank giving money to me.
Does a cop just go, this could be a serial killer, guys? Or do I just watch too much, like, you know, television shows about?
So, it's a great question, right? So serial killer is an academic term. It's coined by the FBI in the 1970s. It's not a legal term. Legal term is multiple murder. So you don't have to prove somebody's a serial killer. I've seen that TV show too. I've enjoyed that TV show too, whatever it is, I think we got a serial killer on our hands. And the dramatic moment in that is very real but it's real in pretty much any murder. The distinction, of course, with a serial murderer, is that they're guaranteed to do it again. Guaranteed to do it again, as are all sex offenders, guys. If you got a real predatory sex offender, whether they advance to the actual killing part or not, they're a child molester, as we call it, or a serial rapist, that is in effect the same dude. It is just one gets off on the murder part and one gets off. The terror of inflicting the sadistic pain is enough. They're almost all sexually motivated. There are, of course, dramatic exceptions to that, but the vast majority, the Bundys, the Alcalas, the Dahmers, those are all sexual crimes. And one of the things I talk about in my book, but I'm going more heavily into in the second one, is there was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud named Dr. von Krafft-Ebing, who was a German psychiatrist in the 1880s. And he wrote a fascinating book called Psychopathia Sexualis. He tries to tackle, it's ambitious, he tries to tackle essentially all sexual deviancy. And he talks about all of it. And it all hasn't survived the test of time. Like he says, product of his time, being gay is a sexual deviancy. Of course, we don't, it's not, and we don't look at it that way. But other parts of it, I think, are way ahead of his time. And in certain respects, I still don't think we've caught up. Like for serial killers, he didn't use that term. He called them sadistic lust murders.
Sadistic lust murders. That's what I was waiting for. I think it's true. Like if you put it under that umbrella and you put it through that lens, what the Bundys and the BTKs of the world are doing, sadistic lust murders. I like it. I like it because actually it's more specific too. But also I saw someone became a member here. Let's see what we're looking at. Marina, thank you very much for becoming a member. You now have access to the members only live streams where you can talk to Shadow and myself. So thank you very much for becoming a member.
And I think he was spot on there. I think that somehow we've lost our way. And like the FBI definition is of serial murder is one individual commits two or more murders at different events, and that's it. And of course, that includes drug dealers who are in the game long enough who can shoot straight, or mafia hitmen, or gang members. And the psychology of those guys, well, they're all psychopaths probably. It's totally different than that sexually motivated psychosexual predator that, the Bundys, the real boogeymen that we have to worry about. Or most recently, I heard he's changing his plea today, Rex Heuermann, which I think is a fascinating modern example of the serial killer. So it's a thing, but it's not a thing, if that makes sense. So I've never seen a cop go, I think we got a serial killer on our hands. But what you do is with modern forensic evidence, a lot of those are linked, of course, with DNA, especially when you're talking about a sexually motivated killing, because you're going to get what the Alcalas, the Dahmers, those are all sexual crimes. And one of the things I talk about in my book, but I'm going more heavily into in the second one, is there was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud named Dr. von Krafft-Ebing.
Dr. von Krafft-Ebing. That's why I rewound. Dr. von Krafft-Ebing.
Super awesome, complete genome with, I think, 23 separate loci that they can check, which is how we get into those incredible numbers of made up numbers like octillions and things like that. That it's, and they'll never say it's a match. They'll say the suspect can't be eliminated because the 1 in a 17 octillion chance that somebody else could share those same genetic markers is scientifically real, but it's not in reality, it's not real. And as a prosecutor, you get to say it's a friggin' match. And of course it is when you get into DNA. So that's how they link a lot of them now. That's how they linked a lot of the old cases with Rex Heuermann. But one of the challenges.
So by the way, his name is Richard von, V-O-N, Krafft, K-R-F-F-T, dash Ebing, E-B-I-N-G. German psychiatrist and author. Died December 22nd, 1902 in Austria.
Is when you got a body that's badly decomposed, or you've got somebody that is a body that's been scavenged, as we call it in Southern California, somebody that's dumped in the chaparral, or you got a skeleton that's found in a grave somewhere, you're just not going to get that nuclear DNA. And there's a lot of those cases, there's a million that you just know the guy did. You just don't want to compromise the integrity of your prosecution. When you got 3 or 4 that you can prove, you charge the 3 or 4, and you can clear the other ones on a detective's desk maybe, but you don't contaminate your case by reaching for the moon and it doesn't add anything. It's incredibly important to prosecute people for cases that you can prove, including extraditing them from other states, because you want to bring justice to their family, and there should be no free murders. But with a lot of serial killers, you just know they committed way more than they were charged with.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
Let's pivot to Nancy Guthrie's abduction. And I'm curious, have you worked cases like this where it's like a home invasion and I guess it's a kidnapping?
This is a unique fact pattern. I guess unique is too strong a word. It's a very rare fact pattern. And I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this with the Ring camera and the guy with the balaclava mask on there. But I've worked a bunch of cases with FBI task forces, with abductions. The Samantha Runyon case that some people might recognize, that was mine, with a missing 6-year-old girl that was abducted from the front of her home, and she's playing with her little friend. It was done by a guy named Alejandro Avila. She was raped and murdered. She was found about a week later at a place called Ortega Canyon. I've worked a bunch of FBI task forces with fugitives. So I've worked task forces. Golden State Killer, there was multiple task forces on that. Joseph D'Angelo, and that, as I mentioned, that was one of my cases. So I've certainly worked the task forces. I've done abductions. I've done sexually motivated abductions. I've done kidnappings for ransom. I've done all of those. I've never seen this exact fact pattern when an elderly woman is taken from her home. I've had I've done 5 no-body murder cases where the person disappears. This is, in my mind, absolutely a murder case, as sad as that is to say. I personally think she was dead in her house, based on the blood pattern that we saw. And but I also look at these through a pretty jaundiced lens of 17 years of murder cases and 4 years of sex cases before that. So I'm one of the interesting things, guys, that you learn working cases like this is that you have to keep an open mind. And when you have, especially when you have missing people, and I've worked a bunch, you will oftentimes walk into a scene where you think it's one thing, and you learn very quickly that that initial impression is often wrong, and you don't know what it is until you know what it is. In other words, until they got somebody in custody in this case, this Chris Nanos guy, the sheriff, keeps talking about, well, we eliminated that guy. Okay, first of all, the sheriff doesn't eliminate anybody. That's the prosecution's job to do that.
Huge right there, right? So when Nano says that, oh, we've cleared the family and we've cleared this person and that person, it's like BS. You shouldn't be clearing anyone, Sheriff Nanos. Put it back. Put it back in the box there. This guy's 100% correct. Only the prosecution, only the prosecutor can be saying, yes, you're cleared. So you have to disregard any of that. And I bet you he was probably pressured from Savannah Guthrie or something like that. And he should have just said no, though. He should have said no. Like, I can't do that. It's against my ethical code. Sorry, Savannah. But he did it anyway.
And when you don't know what it is, you can't eliminate a single person on the planet Earth, really. You can systematically go through it and accumulate evidence that strongly indicates it had nothing to do with it, but you got to keep an open mind because you don't know. And I had a case, Daniel Wozniak. That was a beautiful young woman that was found in a man's apartment who the scene was staged to look like the occupant, a guy named Sam Herr, who was a war hero from Afghanistan. And they're all college students at a local community college. It was staged to look like he murdered her. There was a note. There was all kinds of stuff left for us to indicate that he committed this murder. And I walk in and I'm like, well, this is obvious. It's some lover's quarrel between the two of them, which looks like the majority of murder cases that you go into in Orange County. When you go to a scene, chances are you get that call in the middle of the night. You're walking into somebody's house and they were murdered by their spouse. That's just the vast majority of murder cases that you do in the homicide unit. And it looked just like one of those. And to the credit of my detectives, they're like, no, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I'm like, come on, guys. And this is embarrassing to say, but they were absolutely right. And the killer, what he'd done is he'd murdered the occupant, the war hero. He murdered him, cut off his head and hands to get his ATM card because the guy had combat pay from Afghanistan. And the killer was a low-life loser, community theater actor who saw an easy way to pay his rent. And it was literally that simple. He put together this diabolical plan to murder one person to get at his money and then murder somebody else to throw the detectives off the scent. And it was, I wrote about it in my first book. It was absolutely horrible, but it stands as an example in my mind of you have to keep an open mind. And the Tom and Jackie Hawks in out of Newport Beach, that was the couple that was tied to the anchor and thrown off their yacht. Really similar. Skylar De Leon was the mastermind of that. And he was the most accomplished, most psychopathic liar I ever encountered in my entire legal career. And I monitored his interview and I'm watching this guy tell a absolutely crazy story that was so out there. It was halfway convincing. And again, same thing. I'm going, well, hey, that kind of makes sense, dummy that I am. And my detectives are like, don't be a fool. There's more to it. And they were absolutely right. And turned out that this guy that showed up, he gave his interview with a baby on his lap. Okay. And I was falling for it. And my grizzled, experienced detectives figured it out. And turns out he murdered them and did a completely different murder 10 months earlier down in Mexico that we also wound up prosecuting. So that's one of the things when you see a sheriff like Chris Nanos come out and go, that person's eliminated, I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about on that. And at this point, I'm really frustrated with what I've seen from that sheriff. And by the way, on one of my Newport Beach murder cases, we worked very closely with the Pima County Sheriff's Department back in like 2005, 2006 era, and they were absolutely top notch. They were steely-eyed professionals all the way. And I don't know what happened to Pima County because that's not what we've seen in this investigation.
Could it have been the spotlight that was put on them at the time and kind of, I don't know, causing them to make bad decisions and feeling like they were too under the radar or too under the microscope?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure could have gotten to them, but it seems to me like they had problems long before this anyway. Sheriff Nano seems to be having problems since that RICO case where the FBI was investigating him. And again, to circle back to what I do think it was about hurting Savannah. If it was about money, they blundered it so badly to me. But some people do think it's about money, and that's okay. But I think it was to hurt Savannah or get revenge on Savannah, or maybe they were envious of Savannah. That's always been my thought. Only because of all the ways to get money, this is how you would do it? To kidnap / murder Nancy Guthrie? I mean, I think of all the ways, it's just not a very bright way. And for someone that seemed to know what they're doing here a little bit, so much so they haven't gotten caught yet, I think they did what they wanted to do. Like they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, is what I think.
Well, I've been on that stage, when reporters are firing tough questions out there. I've been at the microphone after the trial's done. But I've been on that stage with elected officials. And you have to expect that, especially when you bring the media in, which Chris Nanos did. Let's not forget, he kind of brought the thunder down, which I have no problem with. Like, appealing to the public for help is a totally legitimate tool when you need it. Okay. One of the things I've got a problem with, though, is that when it wasn't solved and when they started making, and look, I want to be fair. It's a tough job. And I really do. I want to be fair, but I'll share a story with you guys. Elizabeth Vargas, who is a real professional journalist. I mean, she's the real deal. She's at News Nation, and I've known her for years. And I think I've gotten to know her personally. She's a wonderful human being, and she is a real professional. She did her entire career. She's the real deal. And he agreed to go on her show. And she asked him, this is after the gloves were found on the side of the road. Remember that, right? Which was, for anybody that's done murder cases, every single prosecutor and homicide detective in the country was kind of like rolling their eyes at that one, because everybody knows when you do a big enough canvas or a large enough surf, you always find gloves. There's always a gardener's glove. There's always a workman's glove. You always find gloves. In fact, I walked through Central Park in New York today. There's gloves all over the place. Okay, like you walk along, workman's gloves, mittens. People lose gloves. I've got a closet full of one glove that with its missing mate, because we lose gloves all the time. And one of the questions she asked him was, and here's a shocker: who could have ever imagined that a professional journalist is going to throw this one out there? Hey, did you find Nancy Guthrie's DNA on those gloves? Shocker. And he did not know the answer to that. And then instead of saying either I don't know or even I can't comment on that because it's a pending investigation, which I've got no problem with at all, he pushed back and said, you people in the media, and he turned into a gigantic dick, for lack of a better term, and pushed back on her, and she did nothing wrong. And she invited him on the show. He said yes, and that's not a gotcha. That's a legitimate, fair question, and he couldn't anticipate that coming. That's amateur hour. To answer the question, yeah, look, it's scary when those cameras pop up, especially when you're inexperienced, which Chris Nanos has absolutely demonstrated that he is. Supposedly a 40-year career in law enforcement, great. That guy has never worked a vertical homicide case in his friggin' life, or he wouldn't be behaving like that. Or at the very least, he would be answering that question, in a professional manner instead of trying to blame the journalist for asking that, right? So
He's spot on about this. That was showcasing Sheriff Nanos's unprofessionalism, if you ask me. Blaming them like the media's doing something wrong when they're just doing their jobs. Nah, bad form by Sheriff Nanos. Also, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. Spank the like button or leave your DNA of choice on the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And say hello to the flock of black sheep here in the live chat. We've got a very bright, supportive, and encouraging group. A lot of smart people here.
So yeah, it increases the pressure, but he invited the cameras in there because he appealed for the public help. And that, it's, as they say, if you're in the NFL, you got to act like you've been in the end zone before, right? And that is, you got to anticipate that, and that's a fair question. And so the answer in a really long, probably boring way is no. I don't give them that. And another thing is that they returned that crime scene in 30 hours. What in God's name are they doing? And that just reflects a fundamental lack of experience in this kind of thing. And I don't know what happened to the pros that I dealt with in our murder case, because they were great. And I don't know Chris Nanos. Outside of that one case I worked with them, I have no idea.
So like me, Matt Murphy here also disagrees with returning the crime scene so soon, within 30 hours. It's like, yeah, what were you doing with that? Considering the gravity of the case and considering you got it wrong probably in the beginning, thinking she wandered off, why open it up so soon? It seems like someone that didn't want to make it seem like they made a mistake. Oh, we're fine. We got it covered. Meanwhile, the FBI has much better equipment, has more experience. And if you wanted to do the right thing, you let the FBI also do their thing instead of risking contaminating the scene, right? But why would you do that? Ego stuff.
Yeah, the politics in Pima County, but that was a fail. And then you stack on, and I don't know, and maybe they're wrong, but I've read a lot of things about conflict with the FBI, and the FBI apparently wanted to use the Quantico crime lab, which is the best in the world, guys. And the feds have resources that local law enforcement does not have.
Exactly right. The feds have resources local law enforcement doesn't have. Also, one of the flock of black sheep here, Danielle, has a book out. So check this out. It's on Amazon. Jared is called Busting Through to Heaven, an exotic dancer's near-death experience. How about that? So people should check that out on Amazon. See, it's good to put your story to paper. I like it. Hello there, Pamela.
Example, they can do these things called administrative drop warrants, where they can get cell phone records inside of 24 hours. You can't do that at the state level. In California, you need a full-blown search warrant to get into cell phone records. That's California law, which means you got to write a warrant, you got to take it to a judge, you got to serve a warrant, and then you've got to wait about 2 weeks for Verizon or T-Mobile or whoever to go through their process and produce the records. And then a lot of times it goes through the court. It's a completely different process. The feds are a weapon to use when you have a case like this. And when it comes to abductions, they should have been contacted immediately. They should have been brought in. And I can tell you from personal experience, the women and men, the field agents who work those cases are some of the smartest, most dedicated people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And I've done numerous task force investigations with them, and they're the best. And the idea that you're butting heads with the FBI within the first week should be unacceptable to the people that work for that department. And it should be, in the end, unacceptable to the voters of Pima County, if it's true. And I want to be fair. I've read about it. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody personally that's been involved in the investigation. So
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
Stephen King said in his book that when you truly have a story to tell, it's like excrement. You have to release it from your body, like the way you would going to the bathroom. That's kind of like a story. When you have a story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, autobiography-like or not, that's what it's like. And when I wrote my book, Radical Self-Respect, Avoid Falling for the Same BS, That's how it was for me. It was just a story that I had to get out. And maybe I'll write another thing in the future here, but I haven't felt compelled as of yet. But there might be a story or two left to be told. But here's the other thing. I think getting things out like this is also a good way to get the stories out too.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
So where, in your opinion, is this investigation at now then? As we've kind of gone over, it wasn't handled great. They did rule out the Guthrie family, and I'm not exactly sure who ruled them out. I'm guessing sheriff did and not the prosecutor.
I don't know what that means. Honestly, guys, I really don't know what that means. Like ruled out, we understand it in the parlance, a conversation here, but in the context of a murder investigation, when you don't know who did it and you don't know why, how can you rule somebody out? And I'm not for 1 second suggesting that the Guthrie family had anything to do with it, but I don't understand how you're eliminating people when you don't know. I mean, you can have a suspicion, you can have a strong suspicion that this person had nothing to do with it, but to take to the cameras and officially, quote unquote, rule somebody out or quote eliminate them as a suspect, that speaks to the inexperience I think that we're seeing here, because you have to have an open mind to all possibilities. And the problem with saying that person had nothing to do with it, whoever they are, barber down the street, janitor, family member, whoever it is, you are foreclosing, avenues of potential investigation. If it's like, well, hey, I've got a neighbor who says that the gardener down the street might have had something to do with it. No, we've already ruled him out. Let's devote our resources elsewhere. And you can see how that can become a real problem.
Exactly right. That's why Sheriff Nano should not have done that in any way. And I mean, who do you think you are to break the rules like that? Only a prosecutor can do that. Why do you think as the sheriff you can do that? Especially when there's been no arrests, you have no suspects, and you have the gall and the audacity to say, well, actually, all these people are cleared. And actually, if there's a court case down the line, I'm actually giving the defense, if someone who did it, who I said is cleared, I'm giving the defense an argument right there. So, short-sighted move by Sheriff Nanos.
I don't know what it means. Now, but let me mention this. Right now the sheriff is getting all the heat, but I'll tell you, the top law enforcement official in Pima County is a woman named Laura Conover. That's the DA, and I don't know where she has been in this. Now, in the way vertical units work, like we talked about, is you marry the people that are going up to the top of Mount Everest along with the people that are getting you back down again. You put the prosecutor together with the lead detective, and a prosecutor who's embedded in that investigation can see things from the perspective of justice and conforming with the constitutional rights of a criminal suspect somewhere down the line. And that's critical for fairness, but it's really critical for achieving justice, because if you make a mistake because you don't have a prosecutor involved on a case like this, you could blow the entire case. You could blow the prosecution. And I'll give you an example. It's like you get an enthusiastic, inexperienced police officer who kicks a door in without getting a warrant, for example, and lo and behold, it's a jackpot, and you find all the evidence you need. Guess what? That person's going to get away with the crime they committed because there was no corresponding search warrant. There are 1,000 ways that a sheriff's investigation can destroy a successful prosecution. Putting handcuffs on somebody is nothing if they did it, if they're not then held accountable for what they did. And when you see, and look, and again, I wasn't in the house. I don't know what they found inside the house. There's a lot that I do not know. So again, I want to be fair. And this is just my opinion here. But when I'm watching news reports of Bearcats, those tactical vehicles going out, and SWAT teams to arrest Uber Eats drivers that have nothing to do with the case, apparently, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that guy's mother came out and said they searched our house without a warrant. And now she may not know, but that's what she said. That's what's out there. If that is true, thank God that guy had nothing to do with it, because if that happened, that is performative. That's somebody that is trying to look good.
Do you hear that? So if he searched that house without a search warrant, that's another major problem, because anything that happens, anything they find when there's an illegal search, that's the defense attorney's dream come true. Oh, an illegal search. You can't use that evidence. And again, we don't know if that's true or not. Maybe the mother didn't know for sure. But even so, if they were just trying to do something for show, it doesn't help the case. Like, it shouldn't be for show. I get the temptation, considering how many eyeballs are on the case, but ultimately, you have to stay true to your principles. The principles are seeking justice and catching whoever did this and finding Nancy, but doing it in a way so that justice can be served, right? You don't want to undercut your operation by searching without search warrants or whatever else. Short-sighted again. And image-oriented again, right? That's why they say a lot of times, if a narcissistic person runs an organization, it takes on their flavor. Narcissistic flavor. Image is everything.
That's not on Chris Nanos, guys. That's on the DA. And again, maybe she's behind the scenes. Maybe she's personally in there reviewing.
And he makes me take my words back. So he says that's not Nanos, although Nanos has his own problems. He says that's DA Laura Conover. So let me rewind this for a second here.
Look, and again, I wasn't in the house. I don't know what they found inside the house. There's a lot that I do not know. So again, I want to be fair. And this is just my opinion here. But when I'm watching news reports of Bearcats, those tactical vehicles going out, and SWAT teams to arrest Uber Eats drivers that have nothing to do with the case, apparently, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that guy's mother came out and said they searched our house without a warrant. And now she may not know, but that's what she said. That's what's out there. If that is true, thank God that guy had nothing to do with it, because if that happened, that is performative. That's somebody that is trying to look good. That's not on Chris Nanos, guys. That's on the DA. And again, maybe she's behind the scenes. Maybe she's personally in there reviewing all the warrants. She's not, I don't think, but we certainly haven't seen any evidence of that. But that's on the DA. That's on an equal failure. It's like that beginning of Law and Order, right? There are two equally important parts: the investigation and the prosecution. She has been a ghost, and I think that's way more disturbing. And then I wanted to be fair, so I did a little bit of research, and people need to do their own here. And I don't know if it's true, but according to ChatGPT, that woman has never personally prosecuted a homicide case in her entire legal career. She's a career defense attorney. And I think that this is a failure, in my opinion, both of Chris Nanos and Laura Conover. And that
interesting. So she's never prosecuted a homicide. And again, I think she might be in elected position too, because I saw it said she's a Democrat. So why would that even be relevant unless it was an elected position? So I wouldn't have thought to blame her, but he would know to blame her because Matt Murphy is a former DA. So he knows what she should and shouldn't be doing. And so he thinks it would be on her.
And leadership matters, experience matters. And when you have two people at the top who, in my opinion, don't know what they're doing, this is what happens. You don't have arrests. You don't have competent investigations. You have crime scenes that are returned 30 hours later. And the DA absolutely should have been on that, saying we will maintain the integrity of this scene until it has been thoroughly processed by everybody. She lived there alone. What was the purpose of returning that house? And we've seen video of reporters stepping on the freaking blood, less than 48 hours after Nancy Guthrie went missing. That is inexcusable. That's the DA and the sheriff. It's maddening to me. The guy, and just to share this with you, the man that I worked for almost my entire 17 years, in the homicide unit was a man named Tony Rukakis. He came up through the ranks as a prosecutor. He was in the homicide unit. He had done those cases. Then he went on to become a Superior Court judge where he tried murder cases as a judicial officer, and then he became the DA. So when we had a case like this, and I would go in and report to my boss's boss's boss, the elected official, I was sitting across a desk from a guy who had done it before, who understood it, and knew that his job was to provide all the resources he could to me and my team to give us all the help he could and get out of the way so that we could put the case together. I have no idea what this woman is doing. All I know is that she's never done it. She's never prosecuted a murder case in her entire career, if ChatGPT is right. And that is a real problem in my eyes.
Now, if we could shift a little bit to the actual abduction or the theoretic.
And again, experience is going to help, right? You want people to be experienced. If you lost your family member, maybe it's a homicide, maybe it's a missing person, you want the people looking for her to have some experience, right? It's what you would want.
Murder, maybe accidental murder during the abduction of Nancy Guthrie. What is now the motivation of the people who are responsible? And what was the motivation of them in the hypothetical that they went to abduct her, she had a medical emergency and died, and then they realized what they had on their hands? The letters to TMZ, there's a new one that came out, I think yesterday, a new ransom demand or request. Are these real, or are the actual perpetrators, did they dispose of the body in this hypothetical and now they're just gone? And then all these other, I don't know if you call them copycats, but the people who want the publicity are taking advantage of it?
So number one, the TMZ letters are all bullshit. Okay. They just are. You got $1,100,000 in reward money. And if you Google it, you can make that tip anonymously, and they're willing to pay in cash. Okay. So just off the top, common sense wise, who in their right mind is going to want a $70,000 Bitcoin when they can get $1.1 million? Like that makes no sense on its face. Another thing.
And I would agree with that. I think the only reason I wouldn't agree 100% is you would think you could be caught, right? What good is $1 million if it gets you caught? But again, the person said they weren't involved in the case at all. But just because they said that doesn't mean it's true. So that's the one thing I could think, well, maybe that's why you don't reach out for the million, because maybe you were involved and you don't want to get caught. But I tend to think none of the notes were real. That's my thought. And Matt Murphy tends to agree.
Is when you look at the tone and the way it's written, it is like part of my practice, guys, since I went into private practice, is I've
Mike, thank you very much for the super chat here, Mike. Did you see how big the house is to the right of Nancy's, the gem/silver king? He is caught up in cartel wars. His mine had 10 miners murdered December. I did not hear that, but I did see that big house. We saw that in the Google Earth photos that Jen Koffendover's channel was playing yesterday, right? George, welcome, George. Thank you very much for the super chat, Mike. Greatly appreciated.
I've been hired as a fixer a couple of times for people that have been caught up in these scams. And I don't know how many of those text messages you guys get a day on, you must pay your ticket, or, go to the DMV, scammersrus.com website. It's just ubiquitous in our society, right? All of those things are fake. Maybe at the very beginning, maybe one of those was real. I don't know. The FBI, again, best in the world, in my opinion, at sorting that out. And they're not taking those things seriously, and for very good reason. The TMZ ones are patently ridiculous. Like, hey, I could get 1.1 million, but all I want is half a Bitcoin. What do you have to lose? Those people are the biggest parasitic scumbags. In a way, they're even worse than the killers here, because they are taking advantage cynically with the apoplectic grief of a family who has lost their mom, there's no hell deep and dark enough for them, in my personal view. They're the scum of the friggin' earth. And I really hope that the FBI somewhere behind the scenes is spending some resources trying to find them. They found one in Hawthorne, California. I don't think there is they're
like cockroaches. The people that come out of the woodworks for schemes like this, they're cockroaches. But there are some people that's how their brains think. They're predatorial, probably Machiavellian. They have a criminal streak, a sadistic streak, low to no empathy, and they think, oh, how can I take advantage of and exploit this situation? Oh, I'll write a fake ransom note and see if I can get paid. And there's a lot of this online in many ways right now. It's like all the people that try to exploit the elderly, for example, online. There's a lot of monsters that do that kind of nonsense, but they're out there and they don't give a hoot. And it is pretty shitty of them. Also, it reminded me of how narcissists, they don't love, they use, control, and exploit. Those are the kinds of people that would do this. Yeah, they don't care. They just want to exploit the situation. Also, please remember to like the video. Likes are free, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already.
I don't think there's a sense big enough in my mind for those people, because they are attempting to cash in on the grief of a family that is really suffering. And I'm, my heart breaks for the entire Guthrie family, all of them. So no, those aren't real. I think that one of the hypotheticals that she was kidnapped for ransom and died, that's a possibility. I think when you look at the video, I think there's a tarp in that backpack, which means they were planning on moving her out at the very beginning, right? But it could be anything. This, and again, jaded lens here. Typically when a lot of people right at the very beginning of this immediately discounted the potential that this was a sexual assault related thing, that this could have been a sex offender because of her age. And I hate to say it, but you don't age out of sexual assault. You just don't. The very, very first case I worked on as a junior law clerk in the
It's a big one. You don't age out of sexual assault. And Danny Troyer, as Mike King and I from Profiling Evil discussed in our interview, he was young, in his 20s. His thing was essaying the elderly. He would pretend to be a magazine salesman, come in, essay them, and then strangle them, and then dress them back in their clothes again so it looked like they died in their sleep. And Mike King would interview him. And Mike King said to him, Danny, if you were to get out of here, what would be the first thing that you do? And what do you think Danny Troyer's answer was? The first thing he would do if he got out of jail. Open-ended question.
It's an appeals unit of the Orange County DA's office in the summer of 1992 was a 78-year-old Jehovah's Witness who was...
Dana, thank you very much for becoming a member again. You now have access to the members-only live streams. And you had access last time too. So I appreciate that, Dana. Thank you very much.
Brutally raped inside of her home and later died. So it could be that. Again, we have to maintain an open mind. I would be able to speculate, I think, with a lot more accuracy if I could see the photos from the inside of the house. And so we're kind of reading tea leaves here. But the sheriff originally came out and said she was abducted from her bed, right? And then, like everything else that Chris Nano says, he then backed off on that, right? And then Savannah Guthrie later came out and said something very similar, that she was taken from her bed, which indicates to me that there was either blood on the bed or some indication of that she was actually pulled out of her bed. Another thing that seems to support that is he didn't knock on that door. They was trying to cover the camera. At least we didn't see that, or they destroyed the camera ahead of time. And speaking...
So that's the one area of disagreement I would have with him. I would say, well, Brian Entin's source said there was no sign of a struggle in the house. So that would mean no blood in the bed.
The cameras. Remember the clips of them on the roof? They discovered a camera like a week later. Again, guys, that's just friggin' inexcusable. That's amateur hour. Experienced homicide investigators, one of the very first things they're going to look for is cameras, and they're going to look very closely for that. And by the way, kudos to the FBI. FBI is the one that got those images, and they were able to do that. And also, I got to tip my hat to, I think it was Google that
So he was calling them out there. They didn't find those cameras for a week, and he's saying amateur hour. Any experienced homicide detectives, they're going to be looking for all the cameras first and foremost. But again, I think part of their problem was they weren't thinking it was a homicide right away. They first thought that she walked off. And I don't know how long it took for them to not think that anymore, but it shouldn't have taken very long. I mean, how long are we talking here? Maybe an hour of, oh, okay, yeah, she's not here. So this might be something a little more sinister, especially when you see the front porch, right? I mean, how long after you see the front porch would you think, oh, yeah, it definitely wasn't her just walking off? So, but again, that's what happens when there's inexperienced people
that monitored the cameras that were involved in this, and they were able to find what they call metadata, even though she didn't have a subscription. That's really, really good forensic work that is to be commended, because without those images, we wouldn't even know that. But we have to have an open mind about it. Could be a sexual assault. It's likely financially related. I'll give them that. But again, I've been wrong before, and we have to have an open mind. It could be the discharge of a debt. Maybe somebody owed her money. You hit a roadblock on almost every theory, right? Because sexual assault, usually that takes place in the home, and then they leave. This person clearly had a plan to abduct her. That doesn't mean it's not a sex case. Doesn't mean it's not a serial killer. It could be either one of those. So I want to practice what I preach here and keep an open mind as to everything that it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, we really appreciate your time here. If we have just enough time for one more, I just want to get your take on, you mentioned the video of the assailant. Like, what are your observations of his behavior?
Well, that's the boogeyman right there, right? My first thoughts on that, when you look at the gloves and you look at the pistol, which is a 22, and that either indicates.
So, Brenda, that is true too. They didn't have a subscription, but even though they didn't, they still were able to get this picture here, this front porch cam picture, this video. So, yeah, they didn't have a subscription, but they were still able to get some. So, I think they were trying with the other cameras, but they didn't make it. The most they got, I think, at least that we know of, are those thumbnail images. That's it. And it wasn't even from the night of the abduction.
Again, amateur hour by him, or perhaps it's just to get compliance, which he doesn't really need with a woman that old. But maybe that's all about. Or 22 long rifles also they're quieter than virtually any other firearm. So maybe that's more professional. So again, it could be a lot of different things. I've heard speculation that appears to be a walkie-talkie in his pocket with the antenna. That's very interesting. That obviously would indicate that he's communicating with somebody else. But hey, we had a famous case in California where there was a guy that was abducting people, and he came in and he.
Wink, I do think Sheriff Dano should resign. He should resign and step down. They're already in the process of this recall against him. He's old enough, so he should just resign. I doubt, though, there'll be charges, but it's close considering how much he's lied to even get to where he is. He lied about suspensions and his violent offenses, hitting someone with a flashlight that was in handcuffs. I mean, he shouldn't be where he is, and it's only because of lies that he is. But I think he should step down.
Was doing that to fake out his victim. He was doing it alone, but he made it seem like, and he came in all tactical gear. And that was a very famous case where one county they thought it was the husband who did it, and they really braced him hard on an interview. And then he did the same thing in another county, and it took that detective about one day to put the whole thing together. And that was one individual. So again, we got to have an open mind, but I see that guy, and that is the boogeyman. My first thoughts, honestly, was there's no way it's his first rodeo. And I'll bet you anything, and I stand by this one until I hear different, that guy has been in the Pima County Jail before. I would not be at all surprised if that guy is a known figure that has learned a couple of lessons and put that mask on. And again, blind speculation by me. That's when you see the gloves and you see the balaclava and the backpack. He came in. I mean, backpack screams rape kit to me, but I don't know, and we don't know what the DNA, where the DNA was recovered from inside. So there's so much we don't know. And shouldn't know, in a pending investigation. But I think this case will eventually be solved, guys. I think these questions will eventually be answered.
What do you think, Chad? Do you think this guy was in the Pima County Jail at a time? I'm not so sure, because I make a distinction. It could have been someone close to the family or in the family, but that doesn't mean they're the ones that actually did it. They could have hired someone to do it. And where would they have hired someone to do it? That person could be anywhere. Do you think it's definite they would hire someone from the area? Certainly not definite, but certainly not impossible either. So that's the distinction that I make.
I think that it will be years, and tragically, look, the no body cases in Southern California, as a general rule, if they get a body out into the Pacific Ocean or they get a body out into a shallow grave in the desert, we don't find them. Now, that does not mean that that you can't prosecute a case like that. I've prosecuted 5 no body cases, including 3 where our victims are somewhere out in that same desert. Arizona and California. There's a borderline that we drew on a map, but it's the same desert, and we don't find those. Now, the one person that has never prosecuted a no body case, again, is Laura Conover. So whether I have any faith in her office to actually do it if they amass evidence against somebody, we'll have to see. I hope so. But I'm, as you can tell, I'm down on her and I'm down on Nanos at this point. So it'll eventually be solved, but I think it's going to take years. And I don't think, unless somebody talks, I don't think we're ever going to see a body in this case.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, we started this by saying that we've been covering Nancy Guthrie's abduction, and we always try to have people on who can give that type of perspective, all types of perspectives. And we love the fact that you can come on and give your opinion, say that it's your opinion, say you could be wrong, because that's the way to maturely handle this. But you know what? With your experience, I mean, odds are it's probably going to play out in some form, the way you think it's going to play out. And we super appreciate you coming on to give us that insight.
Yeah, you bet. And let me say this last thing. I pray to God I'm wrong on everything. I hope this DA is working diligently behind the scenes. I hope Chris Nanos is way more competent than what it appears to me. And I pray to God that Nancy Guthrie is found alive and we can bring a close to this. I pray I'm wrong on all of it.
I'm not sure how I feel about the piano music, but I did like that interview. I like Matt Murphy. And you could say they did a good job because they let him talk.
Today, we're still on the ransom notes. I can't get away from it because, if the Nancy Guthrie case was ever about money, then none of this makes sense. The ransom, the timing, the messages. Something about this case, it doesn't follow real world patterns. And when you break it down the right way, it starts to point somewhere far more concerning. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you all for being here. I do appreciate it. Now, if you're new here, please take a second to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Now, let's get right on into this, because if you've been following the Nancy Guthrie case closely, you already feel it. Something about this isn't sitting right. Not just one thing, but multiple things. Today, we're not going to rush through headlines. We're going to slow down and look at this case the way that investigators do, through behavior and through patterns, through intent. And I'm going to say this clearly right now, based on everything that's been publicly released, everything that we've seen, everything that we have analyzed up to this point. This was never about money. And if that's true, then what we're dealing with is something far more dangerous.
I tend to agree it wasn't about money. But you want to watch this or Nancy Grace from 2 days ago? I even got him on 1.25 speed there, Rooster. Yes, Shadow says, and D says, remember to like the video. Because Nancy Grace didn't even talk about this case today either. Nor did Ashley Banfield. So we can watch Nancy Grace Day 66. Me and the flu are hopefully headed to sleep. Uh-oh. Got to feel better there, Laura. Thanks for that Matt Murphy recommendation. You'd rather watch Nancy Grace from 6 months ago. So Nancy, 2 votes for Nancy, 1 vote for this. Let's go. We got some more votes. Well, we'll take a look. We'll take a look at Nancy.
Savannah Guthrie's mother, Nancy Guthrie, missing day 66. This as 2 evil ransom-type notes are sent, demanding Bitcoin in exchange for information about Miss Guthrie's whereabouts. This as we learn that there was a live feed of the outdoors in Mrs. Guthrie's kitchen and on a laptop. Is that real? As investigators, including the FBI.
Well, we can do both. This is short.
Now, let's start with what most people are holding on to, and that's the ransom, because that's what gives this structure. That's what people want to believe explains all of this. But when you really break it down, it starts to fall apart. You've got someone asking for roughly a half Bitcoin, approximately $34,000 in exchange for information. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a demand, but when you step back, there is, I believe, $1.2 million in reward money that's available. So now the question becomes, why would someone with real information choose a much smaller amount instead of going after something significantly larger and far less exposure? It just doesn't make sense to me. That's not how real world ransom behavior works. And from a law enforcement perspective, this Nancy Guthrie ransom situation raises serious red flags, because when the numbers don't match the motive, then the motive is wrong. And when the motive is wrong, you have to ask, what is this really about? Now, let's ground this in reality, because real ransom cases are structured. They're controlled. They are deliberate. Clear demands, clear instructions with minimal exposure. Why? Because every second of exposure increases risk. But here we're seeing something very different. We're seeing communication that is inconsistent. It's all public and it's prolonged. This is going into 3 months. This is not a normal ransom situation. And all of that matters, because real offenders trying to get paid, they don't behave like this. Now,
and I agree. That's why I don't think it was about money. I think that's the one thing I disagree with Matt Murphy on, is that I don't think it was money. Now, he would know better than me, but my spidey sense would say, I don't know. I think of all the ways to get money, why this? That's what I would think.
This is not how real kidnapping ransom cases operate. They don't invite attention. They avoid it. But here, someone keeps stepping back into the spotlight. And when someone keeps stepping into the spotlight, they're not trying to stay hidden. Now, let's talk about something critical. Where these messages are going. They're not going to the family. They're not controlled channels. They're going to the media. And that's just not normal behavior. Sending ransom notes to the media instead of the family is just not how this works. Because once you involve the media, you lose control of everything. Unless control is not the goal, unless exposure is. And when exposure becomes the goal, this is no longer about transaction. This becomes about impact. And when something becomes about impact, it becomes personal. Now, we get into the part that matters most here, because once you remove money, you're left with something else: intent, emotion, connection. This kind of behavior, this continued communication, the pressure, that doesn't come from someone detached. It comes from someone who is invested. And in many cases, that means awareness, because random offenders, they don't stay engaged like this. But someone connected, they do. And when someone stays connected, they're not done. Let's go deeper, because every message and every note, every communication, it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty creates pressure. And when that pressure is intentional, it becomes control, because now this is no longer just about what happened. It's about what continues to happen. That's not escape. That is engagement. And when someone is still engaged, they're still watching. Now, I want you to really stay with me here, because this is where everything shifts. What if this was never about money? What if it's not even about Nancy anymore? What if this is about impact? What if this is about causing pain? And more specifically, what if the pain is directed to certain people? Because every time a message comes out, especially referencing Nancy in a negative or final way, it does one thing: it creates emotional damage, not just uncertainty, not just fear, but sustained psychological pain. And here's the hard question: if that's the intent, what does it mean for this case? Because if someone is driven by that level of emotion, that level of control, that level of fixation, they will never stop. They never provide closure. So will they ever lead investigators to Nancy? Or will they continue to send messages or apply pressure, reopen the wound over and over again? Because if the intent is pain, closure may never be part of the plan. And I want you to think about that, because how much can someone endure? How much can a family take when they are constantly reminded of something that they don't have answers to?
Did it say anything interesting while I was gone?
And if that pressure continues, what's the goal? Is it control, reaction, or is it to force someone out of the public eye? These are questions that have to be asked. They're hard questions, but they have to be asked. Because if that's the intent, this is no longer just a crime. This becomes something else entirely. And it all matters, because behavior tells us this. You know, this is directed. And when behavior is directed, there's a target. Now, before we close this out, I want to bring this all back to where it belongs, to Nancy. Because at the center of all of this is an 84-year-old mother, a grandmother, who was taken in the dark of the night. And right now there's a family that's living in uncertainty. So as we move through the day and the rest of this week, and even going into the weekend, let's talk about her, share her story, say her name, because listen, attention, it creates pressure, and pressure creates movement. And to the person responsible or the person who just knows something, there's still time to do the right thing. And if you believe in real analysis, if you want deeper breakdowns of the Nancy Guthrie case, make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and drop your thoughts below.
So, not sure what I thought about that. Not much going on in that video. This will be the last video here tonight because another slow Nancy day. We might have to talk about something else tomorrow, by the way. So drop some suggestions about what else to talk about. Might go other forms of current events too. We'll have to see. Day 66, where are we?
Trying to determine if the so-called porch guy was wearing shoe coverings. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us. Nanos.
And again, Shadow the Night Owl reminds me to remind you to like the video. Likes are free. Spank that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And remember, if you're new here, I go live almost every night, a little bit after 10 p.m. Eastern, to talk about true crime and current events. I use my experience with mental health, addiction, narcissistic abuse, narcissistic family systems to give my unique perspective on true crime and current events. Also, there's a great flock of black sheep here in the live chat. Eccentric, entertaining, intelligent, professionals from all over the world.
Who said, yeah, there's no video. She didn't have a subscription. But yet, there is.
This idea that there could be no subscription, the actual camera could have been disabled, and Google is still able to generate these really extraordinary, chilling images. It ultimately could be what cracks this case.
In the latest missive sent again to our friend Harvey Levin at TMZ, the perp, one of
no mentioning the IR room in this chat.
Them insists, while they're not the kidnapper, according to them, that they know where Mrs. Guthrie is. And they seem very angry that they have been dismissed. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Listen to Harvey Levin at TMZ describing the note.
We got another letter today from this person, an email saying, I know where her body is and who the kidnapper is. Give me half a Bitcoin and I'll tell you. And this person has been really persistent, knowing that if it's a scam, it's a federal crime. Right.
That from our friends at TMZ. That's Harvey Levin on TMZ Live. Dave Mack, what the hey? Now, let's be clear. Savannah, and I believe that she conferred with the FBI before she stated this, says that she believes 2 of the ransom notes are real. Let's divide it up. You've got the...
Now, I have had nothing against that IR room until when I was playing them, I got harassment from multiple people that came in this live chat and were giving me shit for it. They're like, oh, should you be playing the IR room? Should you be doing this? Should you be doing that? And they're like, you'll see, you'll be sorry. And then lo and behold, afterwards, there was a strike or a copyright strike where they're trying to mess with me. So I was like, huh, who did that? Was it one of them? Was it the people in the chat? It's hard to say. But all I know is I won't be playing them again. So we haven't played them since.
The deadline notes, the original ransom notes to which she is referring, where the person says, I have Miss Guthrie. They give information, details about the interior of her home, and they state they want Bitcoin. We'll call that the deadline. Okay. Then we'll call the other notes that Harvey Levin has just gotten, we'll call that the hyena, because he is trying to capitalize on a horrific crime by claiming he can give information about Mrs. Guthrie's whereabouts. So we've got the deadline notes, the ransom notes, and then the hyena. Now, this is why at the get-go, many of us here on the panel tonight believed that 2 of the ransom notes could be real, and we learned from Savannah that she thinks the same. Listen.
The 2 notes that we received, that we responded to, I tend to believe those are real.
From our friends at Today on YouTube, and I guarantee you, knowing Savannah from our days at Court TV, she would not go rogue and say something that disagreed with the FBI analysis. So I agree with her. So we've got those, and then we've got the hyena. Tell me about the notes Harvey received, Dave Mack.
These are from the rat that wants a Bitcoin to rat out the guys, the people who have kidnapped, allegedly, Nancy Guthrie. Now, there were 2 notes sent, Nancy. In one of the notes, this individual says that he had mentioned in an earlier ransom note, Nancy, that he had seen Nancy Guthrie in the presence of the kidnappers. This time, he goes a step further and says, I saw her with the kidnappers in Sonora, Mexico.
Well, you're right, Dave Mack. Take a listen.
I mean, my plans for this channel, though, also on a side note, are I'm going to do these lives, but I also want to do more things like Tony Bruschi does, or just interviewing the people like the one we just watched with the Missing podcast, right? So it's not like I want to just play everyone and only ever do that. It's like, no, I could try to become more of a version of what they all do myself. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes, because I wasn't expecting to be doing this that I'm doing now. But life can be pretty wild and can throw you some interesting curveballs if you're ready to hit them. And that's what I've done here. So, and again, this all started with, honestly, it was Candace Owens. Candace Owens' live stream kind of got me down this path. You wouldn't have thought it now, right? But that's what started it.
And Harvey Levin.
But they also made the point that they wanted to make it clear that they have nothing to do with it.
Right.
They've been out of the country, but who knows?
We forwarded
it to the FBI,
right,
as we have in the past.
Dave Mack, I like your characterization that we had used earlier, the rat. He wants to rat out the real kidnapper. Joining us is renowned psychoanalyst out of the LA jurisdiction, Dr. Bethany Marshall. She is the author of Deal Breaker.
And I agree with that, Happy. I call it having a prosperity mentality, right? Where I try to make sure that I give as much as I take to the people that we watch, right? I want people to go watch Brian and Ashley Banfield, and now the Missing podcast, and Tony Bruschi, and Law and Crime Network, and Brew Crew Beyond, all of them, Nancy Grace, anyone we watch that doesn't give me a hard time, I want people to support them. That's how it works. And the bigger I get, the more that will actually mean to those channels, right? Like when you're a nobody, they don't care. But, you get 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. Well, actually now it's pretty big deal for you to be covering those channels, right? And they'll like it. And it's a I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of thing. I call it a prosperity mentality. Most people are like that. But I've heard a couple are not like that. And we stay away from the ones that are not.
And she is now starring on Bravo and Peacock, and you can find her at drbethanymarshall.com. You know what? The irony, Dr. Bethany, there's so much. But Savannah has to wake up every morning dealing with A, the kidnapper, and now B, the hyena/rat that is trying to make money off Miss Guthrie or her body. And he's very careful to state, now, I had nothing to do with it. I just want to make money off of it. I mean, the gall.
But Nancy, if he wants to make money off of this, it suggests that maybe he knows the kidnappers because he himself is a part of a criminal enterprise. So I would think that if he makes his identity known and he's been sort of thick as thieves with whoever took Savannah Guthrie, that would be more daunting to him than, or threatening to him than facing other kinds of charges for obstructing justice. It's kind of hard to say, but I just think he's sort of one of them that has broken away from the pack, and now he wants to kind of profit off the knowledge that he has.
Well, let's introduce our special guest tonight, David Richards, joining us from this jurisdiction of Arizona. He is the founder and CEO of Blockchain Unmasked. It's an intelligence firm specializing in investigating cryptocurrency-related financial crimes, fraud, you name it. He's dealt with so many criminal cases, and you can find him at blockchainunmasked.com. In your experience dealing with all sorts of criminals?
Yeah, I've heard good things about Surviving the Survivor. I'm all about them. Who's the channel with the couple? The blonde woman and the guy? I've heard some iffy things about them. I can't remember their name. Is it called Hidden Killers? Not Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi, but who am I thinking of?
I think Bethany's right. Who do you think this guy's hanging around with? Nuns and priests and virgins? HELLNO. He's hanging around with people like the person that kidnapped Nancy Guthrie.
That's certainly possible. Obviously, someone that's going to want to throw their hat in the ring on an investigation like this may not be a savory individual, and I'm sure law enforcement's taking that into account.
You know, Dave Richards, of course, you're going to have to take everything this guy says, and I haven't seen him, but I can guarantee you it's a man. Okay, statistically, this is a guy that takes part in a violent crime such as kidnapping Miss Guthrie and her bleeding all over the front porch. It's a man. That said, we'll have to take what he says with a box of salt, not a grain, but a box of salt. But I don't hear anything specific like proof of life. I don't see any specific detail other than I know where they are. They're in Sonora. How is that? How can I believe that?
Well, you can, and that's the main problem. Obviously, if someone did have intimate knowledge of an instance like this, they would likely breadcrumb that information if it were useful for them to achieve their own means, which in this case might be a ransom note or ransom money.
What do you mean by breadcrumb, David Richards?
Sure. If someone did have some intimate knowledge of an incident in this case, it would make more sense that they would share a little bit to then give legitimacy to their ransom note. As of right now, it could be a troll, it could be a fake, it could be someone involved. And I think law enforcement is looking at all of those options.
When you say breadcrumb, go out on a limb with me, David Richards, joining us from blockchainunmasked.com. A breadcrumb such as what to make me believe him?
Yeah, it could be any little bit of evidence that only someone involved would know. It could be a date or time, a timestamp of something. It's something that only someone intimately involved would know.
I would go with something like Miss Guthrie is wearing a wedding band on her left hand and a ruby solitaire on her right hand. Or Mrs. Guthrie asked for Irish breakfast tea with skim milk heated up. Or Mrs. Guthrie is wearing her pajamas and they are red striped with candy canes, Christmas pajamas. I mean, something that only the kidnapper or someone who sees Mrs. Guthrie would know. That would be a breadcrumb to me. Agree, disagree, David Richards?
Agree. If they want to provide legitimacy to what they're claiming, absolutely agree.
With us, Brian Fitzgibbons, you know him well. He's Director of Operations, USPA Nationwide Security, who leads a team of investigators around the world finding missing people, including extractions, including from Mexico. He is a former Marine and an Iraqi war vet. What would you look for in cases you have handled that would be proof this guy, the rat, knows what he's talking about?
Yeah, Dave was spot on there. And, you know, one of the challenges here is this rat, the author of the ransom note, is disconnected from the crime scene itself. So they've intentionally said that all of their information is coming from after Mrs. Guthrie was removed from the residence and purportedly moved to Sonora the state in Mexico that borders the Tucson area. So they would have to provide some very specific details about her state, her condition, things that she said, things that she was wearing. That's what investigators would be looking for there.
Okay, guys, more of our friend Harvey Levin. He is describing notes, and he.
So Nancy, does she have a lot of people on at a time, or is this just a unique episode?
He says at the get-go that this guy has been writing and writing and writing him. It's like that irritating student in class. I'm over here calling me. Look at me. Look at me. That's him. That does not instill confidence, but let's listen.
You have to assume that the law enforcement, they believe that this person is not legit. Otherwise, they would have advised Savannah to pay the money.
Can we just be really transparent? I think you're right that the law enforcement doesn't. There's something.
I just can't figure out why.
There's
Why not
something.
take a flyer? The price of Bitcoin is much lower now. These are like, you could just take a flyer and see what the person knows. The most you lose is 20 grand, 25 grand.
If you have been leaning on credit cards lately just to cover $101.30, $68,101.30. So let me understand. Dave Mack, this guy is asking for a half of a Bitcoin, which would be $34,000.
Right.
David Richards joining us from Blockchain Unmasked. I kind of feel like I'm at an auction. 20, 25, 30, 30, 35, 30, anybody 40? Anybody 40? Am I hearing 41? I mean,
I did enjoy Nancy Grace poking fun at the TikTokers the other day. That gave me a good chuckle. I like that. I think Nancy Grace has a dark sense of humor like me, I think.
He's saying, okay, I'll take a half a Bitcoin. Remember at the beginning, way back when, he wanted 1 Bitcoin. Now he's like, okay, I'll take half. But then once the arrest is made, you got to give me the other half. I'm trusting you. That does not instill confidence. It's kind of a layaway plan. Do you even remember that? We used to buy things on layaway when I was growing up because we couldn't afford the.
Nancy Grace would be great at roasting. Could you imagine if there was true crime roasters out there? Nancy Grace would kill it. I mean, forget Tony Hinchcliffe. Nancy Grace will roast the hell out of you much better than Tony Hinchcliffe ever would.
Entire price of the Christmas sweater. So I'd put down $10 and then come back when we had the other $25. Remember, layaway? That's what it sounds like.
It definitely sounds like used car salesman behavior, where you start at one price and then gradually back down, which certainly questions the legitimacy of this.
Brian Fitzgibbon, half a Bitcoin now, and then after the arrest, the other half a Bitcoin. 35, 34, 50, $34,050 and 80 cents. Essentially, it's what he wants now. It's like a bargain basement sale for Mrs. Guthrie's whereabouts.
Yeah, this is not very credible to me on its face, Nancy, for a couple of reasons. Just the pattern of communication here with no specific information, and the simple fact that they're communicating with TMZ and not directly with the FBI at this juncture.
I'm a Pisces, and Shadow the Night Owl is a Pisces here too.
60 plus days in, doesn't lead to a whole lot of credibility.
Agree. Listen.
My spidey senses tell me that there's something about this guy, because one of the emails he sent said early on, time is of the essence to do this. And then the next day he said, time is no longer of the essence. If he was pulling a scam, why would you say time is no longer of the essence?
Right. You want to keep the value high.
You want to keep
of
the
your
value
information.
high.
Yeah.
And the fact that he said this made me think, this guy knows something.
Yeah, it's a way to look honest as well, though.
I'm not, look, right. I'm not FBI.
So by the way, I agree again with Matt Murphy, who said these notes are bogus. I agree with Matt Murphy. I think they're all bogus. I think they're people just trying to exploit the case. TMZ is hopping on it. TMZ is not much better than the exploiters themselves, honestly. But that's what I think.
We're not privy to all the information they are, but
you're talking about the
from the
psychology,
outside
yeah.
looking in, it sure seems like this person knows something.
Well, right there, Harvey Levin, that's from our friends Harvey Levin at TMZ. Harvey made a really good point. Harvey Levin is not just a pretty face and a tight gray t-shirt. He is a trained lawyer.
Harvey Levin. I wouldn't have pictured him and pretty face in the same sentence, but
Okay, that's a really good point. Dr. Bethany Marshall joining us. What would be the motivation if he wants the money to say time is no longer of the essence, suggesting that Miss Guthrie may have passed on? Why would he say that? They're right.
I think that what is happening is this guy is both a scammer and real, potentially. And what I mean by that is he may tangentially be related to the kidnappers. In other words, the kidnappers bragging, and one person brags to another and then brags to another. And so he gets just enough information to send in the note. And then he gets enough information to say that time is of the essence, and then to say that she's dead. Nancy, whoever.
If the whole thing was to get money, period, I would believe more ransom note stuff. But since I don't think that, that's one of the reasons I think the ransoms are just bogus and an opportunistic attempt to exploit. But that's just me. But I haven't been keeping on it, but please remember to like the video. Likes are free, and they help pay for Shadow the Night Owl's Hootie Snacks. A lot of black sheep can be night owls because, especially if they had a narcissistic parent, they weren't able to be comfortable in their own skin throughout the day because they were punished, or they were belittled and criticized, or their parents withheld love unless they did exactly as they were told. And the result is it feels like you have to walk on eggshells, but there's one time of day that's not the case. And that's at nighttime when everyone else went to bed. You're no longer in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The other option is before people get up in the morning. But my version is clearly the night owl, not the early riser, not the fisherman early riser.
This guy is, he watches a lot of TV because the language in the ransom note feels like it's taken out of a CSI script. Like he writes, millions have been wasted. I'm willing to deliver them on a silver platter. I am disregarded as a scam, but they are free and the case is frozen, but the egos remain hot when it comes to me. It's like somebody who can't put his own thoughts together. So he kind of takes bits and pieces of things that he's seen on TV and he kind of weaves them together into a ransom note. Nancy, this guy is not the sharpest tool in the shed. I mean, he really is not. And one of the things that makes me think that this is credible is that witnesses tend to come forward when the case goes cold because they're no longer afraid of repercussions from the criminals.
It's interesting. You say he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but somehow he has managed to elude.
Correct, Nancy Grace. I agree with Nancy. I don't know what she's about to say, but when she said that guy's not the sharpest tool in the shed, it's like, well, are you sure? Are you sure? They've gotten away with it so far. Day 60, what is it? 68 or 66? 67? But let's see what Nancy says about it.
Law enforcement and the FBI, as has the so-called porch guy, David Richards, founder, CEO, Blockchain Unmasked. What do you make of the fact that he comes out and says, Mrs. Guthrie is dead? I cannot imagine Savannah's reaction to that because I know she's holding on to a very thin hope that her mom may still be alive, and she's putting on a brave face and going back to work and back to her children.
I mean, what do you think you're doing if you're Savannah Guthrie at this point? You're probably not watching any of this, right? You're probably just going to say, okay, I have our PI if we hired a PI. And other than that, unless we hear something official, we're not going to believe a word. We're not going to examine these theories and whatnot because it'll probably just be torturous, right? That's what I would think.
To have the rat state that boldly, I mean, what do you make of it?
Well, it's certainly tragic. My heart goes out to the family in this instance, of course. To be receiving that as a family member, I would be devastated. I would also be questioning and going to federal law enforcement to determine the legitimacy of this note and make sure that every stone is overturned by private investigators and federal law enforcement in this instance.
Right. Brian Fitzgibbons, what do you make of the so-called rat / hyena trying to make money out of purportedly Mrs. Guthrie's dead body, according to him? I'm not accepting that yet. What kind of a person would do that? But that said, is Harvey Levin right that adds legitimacy to this note because he basically he's bargaining with himself, reducing his price by stating Miss Guthrie has passed on?
Lori, I mean, you make a good point because I do think law enforcement knows more than they've said. So between the FBI and local law enforcement, they know more. And is it likely that they also told Savannah more? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know how much more they would tell her, but probably more than to the public, right? So it's likely that she knows information that we all don't know. That's true too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you could look at it that way, right? That, this author of this note is lowering the price, adding some legitimacy by saying, hey, I recognize that Mrs. Guthrie has passed. This is the information I have. I realize that this isn't a rescue operation at this point. Just pay me half a Bitcoin and I'll give you the rest of the info. But the question that I have is, and first of all, let me back up. This is the point of offering a reward, right? The very point of offering a reward is to inspire people with lower morals looking for a monetary gain as for the information they have related to the case. So, if it is authentic, the reward messaging is working.
Guys, this is the scene of the search. This is Mrs. Guthrie's home from our friends at 12 News. And Fitzgibbons, you're right. Again, as I always say to juries in opening statement and then reiterating again in closing statement, look, we got to take the witnesses as we find them. I put up dope dealers as a state's witness. I put up people that were flat out drunk on the stand because I had no choice because they knew what they knew, right? And in this case, if we have to believe a rat / hyena to find Mrs. Guthrie, then we will hold our noses and we will do it. I find it very curious and interesting and possibly probative that Levin, who's on the inside of...
And Rooster has a damn good question. Where is everyone tonight? I think the algorithm's just not very happy with the Guthrie case right now because there's just not as much going on. And that's why Ashley and Tony and Law and Crime Network hasn't mentioned Nancy Guthrie for a while, actually. Ashley Banfield hasn't mentioned Nancy Guthrie for 2 days. Tony Bruschi did yesterday, but not today. So sometimes the algorithm decides, the algorithm dictates many things. And even Brian Entin's views have gone down. I mean, they're not nothing, of course, but they've gone down from the peak.
These ransom notes, we're on the outside, believes that there may be some credibility to them. But you brought up another fact just then, Brian Fitzgibbons, and you're right. Why not just claim the reward? It's a lot bigger than half a Bitcoin. Half a Bitcoin's around $34,000. The reward is $1.2+ million. So why?
Yeah, that's perplexing. The author of this ransom note is apparently going to be leaving, $1.15 million on the table for this information that's, could lead to locating Mrs. Guthrie. And they're communicating with someone who doesn't have the authority to grant that reward, meaning TMZ. They're not communicating directly with the FBI.
Here you are seeing search video from our friends at Today YouTube. The search going into the night. It has gone on for days and days and days. And now all of that evidence is being sifted through by the FBI, both on the scene there in Tucson, in Phoenix, and at Quantico. This is from our friends at Fox News. But he goes on, Dave Mack, in response to why not just claim the reward. He claims he doesn't want the reward. He wants money to start a new life without having to go into the witness protection program. And he kind of connects taking the $1.2 million with witness protection program. Sly, very sly. Explain.
Yeah, he's trying to say that he were to go the legitimate route to, get the big reward, that he would be outed eventually and have to change his entire life and go into the witness protection program, and he'd never be safe. But he just wants a little bit so he can start his life over again and just get out from underneath everything that he apparently is under.
Okay, David Richards, that is a non sequitur. It doesn't follow. It doesn't make sense. He's saying, I don't want the big rants. I don't want the big reward because I want to stay off the Fed's radar. I don't want to enter witness protection. I just want this Bitcoin, half a Bitcoin now, half a Bitcoin later, so I can start a new life all over again. So I won't have to live in fear. But if the perps were arrested, he wouldn't live in fear. He wouldn't have to be in the witness protection program. That doesn't ring true, does it?
Doesn't make sense.
No, it does though, because you're assuming the perps are just in a silo and they're not connected to any other people that are in crime. So, okay, the perps in jail, but that doesn't mean their buddies aren't going to say snitches wind up in dishes, right? So, again, if you're being realistic about this and you know who they are and they're connected people, to collect that reward money is a dangerous thing. Now, granted, it'd be also pretty risky to kill that person because you would think that person would be like protected. They'd be watched. So it's going to be difficult to do it. But they would still try, I think, if they're connected. But what do you think? Do you think it's going to be risky for this person to try to claim this reward? I think so, especially if they're connected. But press 1 if you think it'll be risky. Or 2, no. They collect the reward, the person's in jail, and they're free and clear. Which do you think?
Obviously, if someone had legitimate information, they would bring it to legitimate federal law enforcement and go that route. Whereas in this instance, the various changes of those notes, even the demand of ransom in Bitcoin shows an immaturity and, in my opinion, a lack of genuine knowledge on the case.
And we also learn from Harvey Levin that this is by far not the first time the same guy has written.
Share a little bit of news with you. The person who has been incessantly contacting us,
Although
saying,
stopped for a while.
Yeah. We got another letter today.
So it seems like everyone agrees with me that, yeah, it's going to be dangerous. It's dangerous to collect that money. And I agree. I think all the pundits are like Ashley and Nancy now. They're like, oh, yeah, just accept it. $1 million would be changing your life. Where it's like, dude, like you're putting them in a dangerous spot if anyone even knows something, right?
That's from our friends Harvey Levin at TMZ, incessantly contacting. And not only are they incessantly contacting our friend Harvey Levin there at TMZ, they're also miffed. They're irritated that they're not being taken seriously and considered to be a con, a scam. Okay, Dr. Bethany Marshall, I think we could all use some psychoanalysis right now. Explain.
Well, this irritability and anger that he hasn't been respected, it reminds me of people who are obsessed with crime, but in such a way that they feel that they know the answer behind the mystery. Like they know more about the crime than the people who are investigating it. So this tells me, again, this is somebody who watches a lot of TV, knows a lot about different crimes, is kind of, patchworking together various words that he may have heard on TV. And there's an arrogance to it, as if he knows more than anybody else. That's what I see.
Hi, guys. Nancy Grace here. Please join us on Crime Stories and stream it first on Fox One. When breaking crime news develops, we investigate it and bring it to you. Bombshell updates, answers to unanswered questions from cases.
Beautiful day is so pleasant.
His words, not mine. She is dead. That's quite the blow, isn't it? But yet, Savannah returns.
We celebrate today the promise of a new life that never ends in death.
Good Shepherd, New York. Remember? Maureen, I was talking about this yesterday, right? This was her church. Seems like an Easter thing. And granted, I think a lot of people are interested in this case. A little bit of it, the celebrity factor, a little bit of it is the mystery factor. A little bit of it is the just how it seems like someone just up and vanished, right? So, I mean, because people get interested and invested in the case. I would argue perhaps it could be more empathyless to just dish it when you get bored. How about that?
But standing here today, I have to tell you, there are moments in which that promise seems irretrievably far away, when life itself seems far harder than death. Recently, though, in my own season of trial, I have wondered. I have questioned whether Jesus really ever experienced this particular wound that I feel, this grievous and uniquely cruel injury of not knowing, of uncertainty and confusion, and answers withheld.
How dare these people do that to Mrs. Guthrie and to her family, including Savannah, cutting them to the bone and then making them question their own faith? That's from our friend Good Shepherd, New York, the YouTube.
And again, I get it. I mean, big things like this. I mean, here's the biggest one would be, right? Something happens to your kids. That's a big one that rocks people's faith a lot of times. Or maybe you lose a spouse when you're younger or something, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, fiance. It happens. It happens. Sometimes people's faith get rocked.
It's so easy to go down the vortex of Savannah's pain, her family's pain, so near the surface and so obvious tonight. How do we catch this piece of crap that has done this to the Guthrie family, to David Richards, founder, CEO, Blockchain Unmasked? How do we trace A, the email, B, the Bitcoin account that he has provided?
Sure. Email can be traced through what we consider open source intelligence. You're searching the exact address across the web, public data breaches, looking for the same.
Patrice, I can understand why you would say that, actually, because like she's comparing what she went through to what Jesus went through. You can see that as a little bit cringe, for lack of a better word. But again, when your faith is rocked that much, then you do start questioning things. So, but I get where you're coming from.
Username on other sites, social media, other signups that this individual could have used. That's the email. More specifically, if you've got the info inside the actual email header analysis can show routing path or server info. Although currently spoofing technology does exist and make it a little bit tricky.
Slow down. Explain that, please. Spoofing technology.
Sure. Given the level of technology nowadays, spoofing an email address, making it appear as though it came from nancygrace.com is possible. However, it is also possible to dig deeper into that header analysis, route and path, and server info to determine where an email actually could have come from.
Okay, that's trying to track the email. And I'm not sure how this guy has, and the actual ransomer has managed to stump the FBI. How are they doing it, David Richards?
Well, I don't have specific details, but I can assume that there are certain email addresses, email platforms that one can sign up to remain anonymous, to not provide any information that you or I would use on, for example, a Google. No real names, no real information. It can just be what would be considered a burner account. So that is possible here.
Well, how do you track burner accounts?
Well, it's no different than blockchain. The more interact, the more correspondence, the more data points you have can add to the ability to track an account.
I don't know. The dude looks taller than 5'10" in this, doesn't he? Look at this. Just look at his limbs.
Platform providing
Put him
that
up,
burner.
please. You just told me something.
That dude looks taller than 5'10", doesn't he? Or is it just me?
Something really important. Well, it was all important. I'm trying to ingest everything that you're saying. It's like drinking from the fire hydrant, a lot at once. But you said the more communications, the more likely it is they can trace him. And according to Harvey Levin, who I have no reason to doubt, he's been contacting them incessantly. Wouldn't that help?
It could help. The problem with Harvey is that he may not have the tools or the knowledge to gather what might need to be gathered. FBI or federal law enforcement would be coming in as a second party versus controlling those communications.
Well, he's been handing it all over to the FBI, so I assume they've got all the information, David.
Sure, and that's a little bit different if FBI were actually controlling the information and the exchange of information versus going through a third party. They're still outside looking in that instance. That said, it's still completely possible that this individual is using a burner email account.
Can a burner email account be traced?
Through clever counterintelligence tools, sure, yeah.
Now, we also heard they were using a form to get these notes too online.
Yes, it can be.
What counterintelligence tool?
Federal law enforcement, including other investigators like ourselves, do have tools, metadata from online interactions, and that includes on the blockchain.
Okay, that's how to find the email. But how do trace the email? How do you trace the actual Bitcoin account?
Sure. So a Bitcoin account, I'm sure you've heard it a lot, is anonymous until the flow of funds reaches a centralized portal. I consider this similar to the DMV. You and I can see the license plate numbers, but only the DMV or law enforcement knows who's behind those numbers. Blockchain is no different. So we do need transactions in order to end up determining a flow of funds to a destination that does collect this type of information.
Well, what if Harvey Levin put in, say, $300?
Mm-hmm.
Or does the perp have to move the $300?
Yes. In this instance, the money would have to move. And again, it would have to reach a place where law enforcement can submit subpoena warrant in order to gather the...
So you'd have to think this. The perps gave them a Bitcoin address. That could be their wallet. But from their wallet, they're going to try to red flag that address. So before they send it to any exchanges to exchange for money, they're probably going to flag it. Now, but what they would try to do is probably go to an obscure place to send it so that it would be harder for people to check. But there might be other ways. There could be an OTC thing as well. I don't know. Over the counter, OTC stands for.
Appropriate information around that user. If it's on chain, it
You mean
remains.
if it goes to another country?
We got a super chat from Tiger Shark Diver. Thank you very much, sir. I like owls. Shadow, you hear that? Shadow says he does like tiger sharks. They're the trash cans of the sea, they call them. And where I am in New Jersey, there was a bull shark that killed someone in a creek. And that's what the story of Jaws was based on, they say. So thank you very much for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. There we are. Hype to see no hype. No more tricks from Miss Kim. Trick or treat. No hypes here.
If is transferred to another country, less likely because other countries do not have reporting regulations the way the U.S. does.
Admittedly, they don't have to respond to federal law enforcement. In our work on a daily basis with federal law enforcement, non-U.S. entities can sometimes refuse, although they will also participate in many investigations.
What's the chance that right now, David Richards, as we go to air tonight, there is somebody in some office, either in Tucson, Phoenix, or Quantico, some office with those horrible overhead lights on, trying to figure this out, trying to trace that email, trying to trace that Bitcoin account?
And Kev makes a good point. So what you would do, you wouldn't send it to an exchange. You'd probably send it to another Bitcoin address. And then they would have to track it via the blockchain somewhere. And then it would take someone who actually knows what they're talking about to find it. But what you do is you send it. And yeah, you lose a couple bucks in fees along the way. But actually not as much. Like if you send it from Coinbase, you'll lose more. But you send it to wallet, not as much. But you do that enough, and then you convert it to other things, and then all of a sudden the money's rinsed. Cash is certainly easier as long as you don't have marked bills.
I'd say 100-0.
Absolutely. We work with federal law enforcement all day, every day, and I've got all the faith and confidence that the most intelligent people in the world and the country are on this. So the odds are well over 100%.
Also tonight, I want you to take a look at a monitor that has appeared in a shot of Mrs. Guthrie with Savannah. We believe in Mrs. Guthrie's home. Look carefully at the laptop to Mrs. Guthrie's left, your right. It looks like an outdoor surveillance, home surveillance. Look at that. Okay, let's take it in full again, please. If you will now look just over Mrs. Guthrie's left shoulder on the right of your screen, that looks like it's being projected up on like a TV monitor. What is that, Brian Fitzgibbons?
Yeah, so what you see there on the countertop appears to be a tablet connected to an external keyboard. And that it could be playing, what looks very similar to infrared or night vision live feed from a security camera. This could be connected into that Nest system.
Okay, I don't get it, David Richards. How can there be no trace of this, nothing left behind, when I can see that she has home surveillance video and she's looking at it on her laptop? Why can't that be resurrected?
Well, I'm sure it can be. And I am also certain, given our experience with investigations, that there is information that is known and shared and information that is known and not shared. It's very strategically released and presented by federal law enforcement. But that information is likely accessible.
American homeowners, the FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud called title theft. Your equity, the target. With just a forged signature, your ownership can be transferred out of your name. And without protection in place, Nancy, or just use the link below and good luck. Google pulled a miracle, or a miracle dropped on their heads from above, and they were able to resurrect the video of the porch guy. We're praying for another miracle to help crack the case. This has theories run rampant that the porch guy was actually wearing a shoe covering. Let's take a look at some of the possibilities. Okay, that's one example of a shoe covering, a covering like this. To Brian Fitzgibbon's USPA Nationwide Security, what difference would it make if he were wearing shoe coverings?
Yeah, that certainly narrows the field of footwear, right? I mean, how many people, and in what trades have these very specific shoe coverings? So that would be a very key piece of information. And the big question here is going to be, can investigators match the pattern found in that blood? Was there a shoe print in that blood? And can they match it to one of these coverings or to a specific pair of shoes?
What do you make of it, David Richards? It would show a certain degree of premeditation that if shoe coverings were worn, and there's many different types, and you have to look at the porch guy's shoes to determine, is that possible? The reason I care, if shoe coverings were worn, that would be an entirely new avenue of investigation to find out who bought those, who had them in the neighborhood, maybe construction workers, maybe HVAC workers, maybe people that were coming in and out of Mrs. Guthrie's home that didn't want to track mud into her home. It could mean any number of things, David.
Absolutely. If true, to your point, it does mean and would indicate a level of premeditation. I would certainly argue that an incident like this requires.
Of course, there is premeditation. Is that even a question at this point?
That regardless, it was not haphazard. It was likely planned ahead of time. And shoe coverings, if that's what was worn, is an indication of that.
Take a look on the right side of the screen at the shoes there. They look somewhat different than the ones he's wearing on Feb 1. So did he not wear shoe coverings Jan 11 and did wear them Feb 1? These are some of the questions that the FBI is investigating as we go to air tonight. If you know or think you know anything about Mrs. Guthrie's whereabouts, please dial toll-free 800-225-5324. If you wish to remain anonymous, 520-882-7463.
All right. Well, I'll be curious, no hype, if there is possibly a way to convert it without them finding it. Like if you convert it to Secret Network or frickin' Oasis, if that would mask it enough to truly avoid detection. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the answer to that question. Nah, you don't need to be sorry about that, Danielle. There's a big thing to go through. Absolutely. But that's really all we had here for tonight. We stretched it. We stretched it there with the Brew Crew and Nancy Grace. But as you can tell, I liked the Matt Murphy interview, but there really wasn't much else going on. And I think you're right about that, George. I think I got to go out there and demote Sheriff Nanos. I think I might also need to demote Laura Conover, the DA, and then see what happens. So yes, have a great night, Jane. Julie, welcome. Black sheep that are here, welcome Julie to the channel. We have a great flock of black sheep here that are very supportive, encouraging, eccentric, intelligent. We have professionals here from all over the world. We get some banter in here as well. Snow Baby, that's why Maureen calls him the front porch phallic bandit. Like I said, Julie, I'm usually live 5 to 6 nights a week, a little bit after 10 p.m. Eastern. And I talk about true crime and current events. And I use my unique experience with mental health, addiction, narcissistic abuse, and narcissistic family systems to give my unique insights on those things. If you look through my channel, you see a lot of shorts about narcissism, psychology. I interview a lot of professionals such as Dr. Peter Salerno, Dr. George Simon, Dr. Z. among others. Lots of people with lots of experience. Personal experience, too, as it's pretty important. So, Julie, right next to me here is Shadow, the night owl. He's the spirit animal / mascot of the show. People like the video and send super chats, super stickers, and channel memberships to get him Hootie Snacks. Shadow lives exclusively off of Hootie Snacks. Sweet honey. There you go, Julie. Bachelor's in psychology. We love it. We love to hear that around here. I think you will, Julie. I think you will. Home sweet home, they say. There's no place like home. Right, Heather? Shadow says hello. Shadow is giving a warm welcome to all newcomers. Shadow's also wondering, though, where Jolly and Ellie are. Haven't seen them for a minute. Sweet honey. Or sweet honesty. Ooh. Nope, we are the East Coast here. We are true night owls, Julie. It's 1:23 a.m. where I am. 10:23 where you are. And from Georgia. She's a Georgia peach. Sociology is pretty interesting too, Chatty. Absolutely. I've gone to school for mental health counseling and addictions counseling, but my bachelor's degree is in marketing. And I went to Ryder for their mental health program. But honestly, I didn't learn very much about narcissism there. So, Julie, you'll love it here because usually I'll go even later than this, but I also started a little bit earlier than normal today. Not much. Well, I try, Danielle. Sometimes I fail, but I try. Or as Yoda would say, there is no try, there's do or do not. I do a lot of doing. Maybe I do not perfectly do, but I do. Skin so soft, that smell brings back the memories to when I was in kindergarten, keeping away the pesky mosquitoes. Nanos is probably narcissistic. I don't know if he's got a full-blown disorder. The big thing would be narcissistic operating system. He very likely has one of those. His actions seem to show it. He's on that narcissistic scale. Yes, Julie, it has me baffled too. They have nothing. They need more DNA. They need to listen to CeeCee Moore, and maybe they can get DNA from the house, and there'll be better samples than the complex sample they have now. But we'll see. But all right, folks. It's about time to rock and roll here. I'm a little bit tired. But I'll be back again tomorrow night. But no, is this Thursday? Yeah. I'll be back again tomorrow. Hopefully there's something good going on tomorrow night. Maybe it'll be Nancy's case. Maybe it'll be a different case. Yeah, Julie, so she was saying that they have a complex sample. You want it to be 40% of one person. Although a forensic expert that was in here was telling me 28%. You want it to be 28% one person. And then you can do genetic genealogy on it. But we'll see. You have a great night as well, Tina. Always a pleasure. Teresa, you have a great night too. Thank you, Julie. Tons of content here to go over. Kev, yeah, on the fence but can't climb over. I love it. So, Steal everyone's Avon. All right, Lori. This is also true, Sharon. So Rooster, No Hype, D, Julie, Danielle, Miss Kim. Did we see song bits in here tonight? I don't think we did. Marina, Dana, Mike, D, everyone else, Autumn. There's Autumn and then Autumn with an E, and Tina. Till next time, everybody. Everyone, again, should check out Danielle's book on Amazon. What was the title of the book again, Danielle? I'm the worst. Have a good night, Kev. You have a great night, Jennifer. Autumn Elizabeth. Autumn with the E. There you go. I love it. Me too, Rooster. Takes one to know one too, doesn't it? Drop the name of your book too, Danielle, so people can check it out on Amazon. I know I put it up on the screen earlier, but in case people forgot. As do I, Danielle. I don't think they like the true crime as much. They like the narcissism topic. I know Ellie doesn't. Ellie doesn't like true crime. True, Tina. True. Very good, D. All right, guys. I will see you all. Yeah, so Tina, correct. Danielle, type the title of your book again before we go. Well, I guess Danielle's not going to write it. But all right, guys. Heather, you have a great night too. I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you, Dave. Yes, hit the like button on the way out if you haven't already.